Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, are you done being jet-lagged yet?
No, but that's kind of impossible for me to evaluate because I don't sleep and I'm always tired.
It is kind of hard to gauge that sort of thing with someone who drinks as many energy drinks as you do.
Right, yeah. So, but I'm going to say no and assume that's my best faith answer.
You do have the 96-hour energy just in case you need it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I do. Yeah. So, just in case, we're in a good spot, I think.
So, apologies that we weren't able to do a show last week. We were both hilariously jet-lagged from Dusty's bachelor party. And while the show is funny, if one of us is jet-lagged, it suffers greatly if both of us are. At that point, you're better off just listening to Luke. So, I got to use one of your jokes. Awesome. Fantastic. I'm not suggesting that we have a Google Doc that says jokes to make fun of Luke for. I am saying that we should. So, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. This show is going to be a little bit all over the place. It's an off-season show, but with everything kind of going on, we're going to steer off topic pretty quickly during the mailbag. So, stick around. There is going to be some football stuff in it, but there's also a bunch of because we just needed to laugh or we just needed to do something over the last couple of days. So stick around for that. But again, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We're a couple weeks out from our last episode, so we've got a few updates to go over. We also have some OTA stuff to kind of go over, some thoughts. What are the Vikings doing with Dalvin Cook, for example? Things we should cover. And then, of course, we have the mailbag as well. But before we start, thank you guys so much. And we have some Patreon people to thank here as well. We have Eric Meisel. Thank you so much for joining. I am going to slaughter this name, and apologies, as I stumble through Gudny Krista Johnson? Apologies, that is the best I can do, and I am shaming my Norwegian heritage just slaughtering that. So
I'm so happy that you've put yourself in this position.
My Norwegian heritage is like above spec. I have a grandma named Olga. Like I should have the ability to just roll names like this off my tongue, and I just can't. But thank you, Gudny. Thank you for joining, and a quick message from this new Patreon subscriber. See how I did that? I was having the absolute worst day today, and I was wondering what I should listen to when doing the dishes because the dishwasher was broken. I'm so tired of listening to Judd talk crap about Kirk, and then I saw Trading with Green Bay Part 2. Thank you, Jesus. So I went straight to Patreon to become a member. P.S. If you could somehow put Arif's laughter into like a doorbell jingle or keychain or something, I would buy that. Not the first time I've heard a request for that, by the way. Thank you so much for signing up. Also, Mac McCullough signed up and said, "Hi, Arif and James, longtime listener, first-time subscriber, big fan of your work and wit. What finally pushed me to subscribe was your discussion of Ed Ingram. Arif, I was so impressed with your thoughts and coverage on the topic and applaud you for actually addressing it versus adding a passing mention of his, quote, situation or, quote, off-the-field issues." So thank you, Mac, so much. Also from Kevin Nelson, thank you for joining. Hey guys, love your pods. You guys really seem to provide reasonable assessments of the team based on the research and the reporting you do. It's a welcome approach compared to some of the more hot takey options. Looking forward to another overly optimistic run up to our eventual disappointment in the playoffs. Boy, if that's not a sign of Minnesota sports, I don't know what is.
Is that I can't even tell. No, hey, that's fair. Never mind. Yeah, we're good.
There was a discussion on the Discord earlier about why do we Minnesota fans do this to ourselves as like the Twins are getting decent. And my only response was, I want to believe the Twins aren't going to lose to the Yankees again in the playoffs. I want to believe that. I know what's going to happen, but I want it to happen. As I want this to you just want the Twins to win a playoff game for the first time in, years. Just one. I'm not asking for two. Just one.
Yeah, just like baby steps.
Yeah,
it's like
we'll get there eventually.
It's like asking the Timberwolves to get past round one once ever.
Maybe not below a 20-point lead. We'll see. But
I mean, yeah, baby steps.
Baby steps, yes. But if you'd like to subscribe to the show, if you'd like bonus episodes, if you'd like access to the Discord, that sort of thing, we're going to be doing some cool stuff on Patreon here coming up shortly. Check us out over at patreon.com/Norse Code. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code if you'd like to give a one-time donation, as opposed to Patreon, which is a subscriber-based model every month. Or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and join the single digits of people who have gone out and purchased an Arif throw pillow. And why this is a thing, I know why this is a thing. I put it there because somebody had requested it. But the fact that someone had purchased it and posted a picture of it almost defies description. But if you would like to be that cool, or get yourself an Arif shower curtain, you can do so over at norsecode.threadless.com. And if you're going to buy that, let me know and I'll give you a code to get a couple bucks off of it. I just want to see what that looks like in person.
I just don't understand any of you.
It's called the Cult of Personality. Just lean into it. You're fine. But that's again over at norsecode.threadless.com. All right, so we are done with the main shilling. Let's get into some other types of shilling, because the schedule release came out and the Vikings have two scheduled games that'll be in prime time. This helps someone with the pedigree of like Kirk Cousins and his inability to play in prime time, or the narrative of it anyway. So we've got that. But most importantly out of all of this is that the London game was announced and the Vikings are going to be playing. So,
which is a nationally televised game, certainly not a primetime game.
No, not a primetime game in the US. The opposite, really, of primetime, Sunday morning. But that Sunday morning, Norse Code is going to be in London for the game. We are intending to be there to record a live show, probably on the Thursday before, and do something the evening of, which will be right after the game. So there's a lot of time between now and the beginning of October, which is when that game is scheduled. Lots of details will be announced when we have them. If you live in the UK and would like to help us put this together, please reach out to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. I will be happy to take your information and discuss some of this further, because we want to do it right this time. We would prefer to do a show and not get kicked out 20 minutes into said show. So
that is good content, but yes, I would prefer to have the show instead of content about an inability to do a show.
Yeah, at that point it's just a New York thing, but not as loud.
Right. Not as loud.
So, but yeah, hit us up, Norse Code at Norse Code Podcast at gmail.com. Looking into getting that situated. Reef and I are very much looking forward to it. Dusty is also wants to join us over there, so that could be.
You sound so skeptical of the idea.
Well, listen, I don't know what the next few months are going to bring for any of us, really. So Dusty has committed to.
Was it Kyle Shanahan who was like, we could die tomorrow?
Yes, Kyle Shanahan, who said, will you commit right now to Jimmy G being your starter? It's like, I don't have to commit to anything. We could all be dead tomorrow. For Kyle Shanahan.
Truly a Norse Code listener.
For Kyle Shanahan's, I'm not a nihilist, you're a nihilist corner. Yeah, so... also, we are potentially looking at Chicago at the very end of the season as well in January. So these are your two big announcements. We're definitely doing London. Chicago is likely. We just have to figure out a couple more things. So the likelihood of the Chicago show increases if you go over to Pay Norse Code on Patreon, patreon.com/Norse Code. This does, in fact, get us over there a little bit easier. So check that out. We've also got something cool to do with what I can only describe as the world's greatest piece of merchandise that's not a Josh Freeman Vikings jersey. So I've got to figure out what we can do for this. It's got to go to a Patreon person. You said it yourself.
Yeah.
This thing's got to go to a Patreon person. We'll figure it out, but that is the current plan for live shows this year. We're definitely doing London, and Chicago seems likely. We just have to firm up a few details for January. So that's the big news. The fact that the Vikings are ending in Chicago is incredibly rare, but opening with Green Bay is kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, opening in Green Bay, I think, is advantageous for the Vikings just because, new scheme, new defense, new offense. And so the fact that it's at home obviously helps a lot. The fact that, the Green Bay won't really have any meaningful film on the Vikings helps a lot. It is maybe the best scenario in terms of, taking on Green Bay twice a year, having the first game at home without any meaningful film. Even Kevin O'Connell talked about kind of some of the advantages of that. Yeah, technically it was off the record, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that is an advantage. It's kind of self-evident, but it's one that he anticipates being able to use, right? And so all of the stuff that makes the Vikings personnel unique within this particular offense, right? Because this offense is out everywhere, right? It's the most popular offense in terms of the way people cover the NFL. It's the offense du jour in terms of the way people engage in the hiring process for new NFL head coaches. It's also an offense that the Green Bay head coach, uses, right? So it's not the offense that's unique. It's how the Vikings personnel work within that offense. And so I know that O'Connell really likes the opportunities that come from the way that the Vikings personnel interact with that offense. And, obviously defensively, something similar along those lines, right? Because the Vikings have maybe a little bit more talent at linebacker than a lot of these defenses have had with Eric Kendricks there. They've got maybe a little bit more talented edge rusher than some of these defenses have had. Certainly less along the defensive line, a little bit less along the cornerbacks, which is a hallmark of a lot of these defenses. And so the way that this defense will have to be constructed is going to be a little bit different. But I think that that's going to help the Vikings out a lot. These advantages tend to be overblown, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, they have Aaron Rodgers, right? But like, I don't know. I just feel like, this far in, with the Vikings versus Aaron Rodgers, some of it might just be a Mike Zimmer thing, and that's gone now. But it feels like Aaron Rodgers is less intimidating to Vikings fans than to fans of other teams, just because the Vikings have kind of found ways to get out some wins that they probably didn't deserve against the Packers over the years, and it's happened consistently enough that there just isn't that kind of it's still intimidating, but it's not big. So. That I think is a good way to start off the season for Minnesota.
So the Vikings are going to be playing at home against Green Bay. What a good place to start, right?
Yeah.
And considering how poorly the Packers played Week 1 last year, getting just demolished.
That's right. They got crushed. Was it the Saints?
Jameis Winston looked like an All-Pro.
That's some 40-odd points. Yeah. Wow.
No, neither team looked like that for the rest of the season, but for that one moment, it was a shining example of the things that could be. Be the change you want to see in the world, Green Bay.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So, the schedule itself is exactly what you'd expect. It's been a couple of weeks since it's been released, so there's not much more to add on it, but we definitely wanted to make mention of especially the Green Bay game, but make sure to mention what we are planning for the rest of the year and into next. So
yeah, just real quick, obviously, so you mentioned the two primetime games. The first primetime game occurs the week after against the Eagles. Couldn't ask for a better opponent, I think, in that circumstance. The other one is a Thursday night game, of course, because every NFL team has one that occurs somewhat later in the season.
That's Thanksgiving night.
Yeah, that's the Thanksgiving night game. Yep. Yeah, and so that one's against the Patriots. So there's that. Plus, of course, we mentioned the nationally televised game. And other than that, it's a bunch of noon and afternoon games, which I think is ideal. There are a couple of games which are to be determined in terms of timing. One is the Week 15 against the Colts. The other one's the Week 18 against the Bears. So if the Vikings are playing well enough, those could suddenly become primetime games. But that's That's how the schedule is playing out. And the Vikings were given an option to take the bye right after London, but the London bye was in week 4, or the London game was in week 4, so they would have had to take the bye week 5, and the Vikings declined because they don't want to go play, was it 13 games in a row right after that? They want a break to occur a little bit later so that the number of games they play in a row is smaller. So there is that. So we've talked a couple of times about how teams should be automatically awarded a bye after London. I generally think that that's true, but also I don't know if a London game has occurred this early in the schedule before. So that does change things in terms of that element of how schedules work. So I just wanted to add those things in there before we moved on.
We'll see how that bites us moving forward. I'm real curious to see what the team is going to be like. Just because I bet you have the schedule still up. Who is the game directly after the Saints game?
At home against the Bears.
Well, I mean, at least it's not a division opponent, right?
Right. So it's not an opponent that the Vikings have historically played down to.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
That. All right. So now that we've covered that, other stuff that's happened in the immediate aftermath of the draft, there was a discussion, and you can elaborate more on this here in just a moment, along with Kevin O'Connell, as to some post-draft stuff, and specifically the top 5 picks. So why don't we go over some of the things that you've learned from the team and kind of their mindset moving forward?
Yeah. So one thing that the Vikings tried to do throughout the draft process was to find ways to deal with the overload of information that every front office has, and to drill down on kind of what pieces of information are important and not important. And this is I've been critical of the Vikings after the honeymoon period is over. I've been critical about the way that they've approached the process, but this is something that I think a lot of organizations generally and a lot of NFL teams don't think about that much, which is thinking about how to think, right? How to take in data and interpret it, not just how to break down data, produce the best models, and quote unquote do analytics, but rather how to take in as much data as possible and filter it through a mechanism that allows us to quickly evaluate players and have an understanding of what that player is going to look like in our system. And so they had meetings about kind of what are the core questions we want to ask of each position within the systems that we run on offense and defense and on special teams. And so they nailed it down to 3 to 5 questions, mainly 4, but that you would ask of every one of those positions. For its safety, one of those questions is, does he have range? It's a very simple question. It's actually pretty simple to answer. And so it doesn't require an overload of information, but it was one of the most important elements, right? And so one thing that I always have a little bit of difficulty kind of getting across is when I'm presenting, for example, I've written 2 scouting reports over at The Athletic about some of the players the Vikings have drafted. There's a lot of data and some charts with data in them. And the way the data is presented, and this is a limitation of the infographic software I'm using. If I was just a little bit better at coding, I could just do it myself. But one of the limitations is that each slice of data within the pie is presented as if it's equally important. And so you get, say, Lewis Scene's 40-yard dash time and his bench press, and they're equal. They occupy an equal amount of space, but the 40-yard dash is way more important in terms of predicting how well a safety is going to do. But if that bench press score is really good or really bad, it's going to look like, no matter how good the 40-yard dash is, that he's deficient in some way, when really, yeah, maybe, but not in any significantly meaningful way. And so a question that can be simply answered, like, does he have range? Here's what the film tells us. Here's what the workouts tell us. Here's what the movement data analytics tell us. That's only 3 pieces of information, but it answers this one question. It's one of our 4 questions, and so we can check that box saying yes or no, right? And they went down the list and they tried to take a look at some of these core questions, and they look at evidence about whether they fit those, and so they can put away some of the information that's irrelevant, like bench press, or maybe how they did in particular aspects of the psychological evaluation that are a little bit less important for a safety, right? And they can focus on some of those core questions. Then they can backfill in some of the tertiary questions with some of the additional data they've received, but they tried to focus on not taking in 80 things at once, is a phrase that Adolfo Mensa used. And it's one reason, he says, and I think that he's right, that teams tend to fall into player comps, right? Because your brain just wants to say, well, he looks like this other guy. And that could be useful, right? Because it tells you how a player is going to be used and stuff like that. But your brain is looking for shortcuts. So if you can guide which shortcuts it's going to use, maybe that's going to be better. And so that's what he was trying to focus that front officer on. I really appreciate that because it, at least, I don't know if it's correct or incorrect, but at least it shows a thoughtfulness about the way that that process is created and not just taking in the previous process that the Vikings may have used, right? So there's a lot of that. Now with Lewis Cine, and again, we went over all of the draft reports of these players in a lot more detail on the 2-part episode that we did 2 weeks ago. So if you want more detail, take a look at that. But there's some things that the Vikings told us about some of these players that I can talk about. And one thing that they really liked about Cine, besides, we talked about the range a little bit, we talked about the hitting power. One thing that they really liked is just kind of the way, how quickly in the way that Cine diagnosed what he needed to do and what the offense was doing. When he broke down some film against Alabama, by he, I mean Kevin O'Connell broke down some film against Alabama, broke down some film against Michigan, and broke down some film against LSU about what Cine was doing before the snap without acting before the snap. Because one thing that was really important to the Vikings in the way that they constructed their defense is that they're going to be in too high a lot, if not every single time. And they want to give information as late as possible to the quarterback about what they're doing. So after the snap, they might rotate to cover 1, cover 3, or whatever. But before the snap, they're always going to be in cover 2. And it requires a lot of athleticism for, a single high safety to book it back 35 yards from cover 2 and be the single high safety while recognizing what's going on and all that. And that was something that they really, really liked about him. But one thing that I think was kind of cool is that he talked about when they had Cine come in after the draft about the various things that Cine was breaking down in his own film against other teams that they couldn't get into detail because of the time limitations they have in pre-draft meetings like the Combine and stuff like that. And he was talking about, hey, when the quarterback did this with his hands, he was telling this receiver this, right? And because I know he's telling his receiver this, I know that my guy, the tight end on the backside, he has to do one of two things. It's this or that. And so I've narrowed down my options. As soon as the quarterback waves his hand like that, I've narrowed down my options to these two things. So I just have to look for a tell on which one of those two things is. And that's how I was able to get that pass deflection, right? Because the tight end ran a dig and I was able to know that he was either going to go up or in. I knew he wasn't going to go out because of the concept of the offense. And so I knew that I could either close or I could gain depth, right? And because, his hips did this, I knew exactly what he was going to do and I was able to get there before the tight end did, and that kind of stuff. And he talked again and again and he was like, hey, the quarterback did this. That's not what his check is supposed to be there. His check is supposed to be this. So what was really crazy is that not only was Cine telling us, hey, I know what the quarterback signal is, I also know what the quarterback is supposed to signal against the look that we're providing. And I know that the quarterback made a mistake in his own offense about what he was supposed to do. And he instead did this, which allowed us to do this. So that, I think, one of the things that Dane Brugler mentioned was that Lewis Cine was one of the smartest safeties, if not the smartest safety in the draft, right? There are two players that at defensive back that he outlined as remarkably smart, Trent McDuffie and Lewis Cine. And this is one reason that Cine earned those plotted. So that's kind of what the Vikings emphasized with him. That was really cool. With Andrew Booth, obviously we asked a lot of questions about how do you know kind of when he doesn't do workouts, how athletic he is, how do you know what his health is going to be like? But they talked a lot about his technical capability, right? Everyone knows that he's a big athlete. Everyone knows that he's got length, that he's got speed, that he's got unnatural agility for somebody who is as long as he is, especially somebody who has longer legs, right? Because it's not just your height that will help determine it, but your the smaller your torso is, the more leg you have to move within a particular height. And the more difficult it is for you to, they call it, being a high cut, the more difficult it is for you to make these small movements really quickly. And so they talked about all of that, but they specifically talked about his technique and his patience and his ability to, put his feet in the right place, really advanced for a player as young as him. And so, they talked about his balance, his length, and his recovery capability, but they mostly talked about, when he's got one hand in press or two hands in press. They talked about, what he's doing with his feet when he's got outside alignment, inside alignment, that he knows how to play cornerback at a technical level. And then on top of that, he has a lot of athleticism. So that's something that they wanted to emphasize to us about the things that he does. He stays square to the line of scrimmage, is something that they like a lot. And he takes advantage of the way the quarterbacks do the progression. So there's that. Ed Ingram, we talked about him last episode. James mentioned that you can listen to that for more in-depth discussion about the off-field stuff. But on the field, obviously the Vikings in the film room session didn't talk about a lot of that off-field stuff. Again, if you want a deeper discussion, that's well worth having. We had that 2 weeks ago. But the on-field stuff that they really liked about him, the one trait that they really thought was kind of out of this world for him was his awareness, right? They liked that he was strong for his size, that he seemed to play pretty athletically, that within a phone booth that he's got quick feet, that he played different kinds of zone. But really, they liked his awareness, that when he was on a double team, he knew where to put his eyes to keep track of late blitzers or stunts. He knew exactly kind of what to do in a tackle end stunt when the tackle had to penetrate inside and the end looped around, and he knew to make sure that he got his eyes on the looper. He knew that if there was a delayed blitz, he knew exactly when to get off of his double team to meet the blitzer, because he doesn't want to put his tackle or a center, whoever he's on a double team with, in a bind and put that player in a bad position against the person they're double teaming. So he has to shove that guy into the right alignment before he meets the blitzer. So his ability to kind of have an understanding of where all the defensive players are and what they're going to do or what they've got the capability of doing is something that they emphasized was really big for them. So that was something that they pointed out again and again in the post-draft meeting for Ed Ingram that I thought was pretty relevant and important. For Brian Asamoah, they didn't spend a ton of time talking about him, unfortunately. They moved on pretty quickly from him to Caleb Evans, because at that point, we had asked too many questions and we were running short on time. But they really like that he's got what they think is instant special teams capability, which, if we remember, the last third round pick the Vikings had, a linebacker, did not seem to have that. And they think and one way that they asked questions about, quote unquote deficiencies in a player, like for example, for Brian Asamoah, it's his size. They thought the way that Adofo-Mensah approached these questions was, well, is this a weakness or does this point to something that would be a deficiency in his game, right? Because size itself is not a weakness. It just points to several categories of weaknesses, right? So you may not have the length because of your size. You may not have the length to contest a window in the passing game. You may not have the strength or the anchor to take on a guard moving up to the second level. You may not be able to shed a block and get to the running back, right? Those are your actual weaknesses, how they translate onto the field. And so he said, well, hey, this is something we have to keep in mind in terms of how traits translate. But in terms of what those weaknesses materialize as, he doesn't have them, right? Is the Vikings kind of stance on this, is that he did a good job shedding blocks. He did a good job, finding ways to get his arms inside passing windows. He did a good job finding ways to squeeze lanes, despite the fact that he doesn't have as much strength as other linebackers. And they looked at Eric Kendricks as a modern day linebacker that would have been undersized in a previous era. And remember, I wrote, when the Vikings drafted Eric Kendricks way back in 2015, I wrote, first of all, I thought he was a first-round player, so I didn't really think that he had too many weaknesses. But I wrote that one of the things that you're concerned about is his size, right? He's a little bit bigger than Brian Asamoah, so it's not quite the same. But in 2015, we were thinking of linebackers more along Anthony Barr's size, 250 to 260 pounds, rather than Eric Kendrick's size, 235, 230 pounds. Now, Asamoah was like 225 pounds, so it is a little bit different. But, we talked about that then. and how that was a weakness that Eric Kendricks had coming out of the draft. It's the weakness that he had for the first couple of seasons, his ability to shed blocks. Now it's not really a weakness of his anymore. He's kind of nailed down the appropriate where he needs to be strong, how he needs to approach blocks in order to shed them. But that's something that they thought, hey, in the modern NFL, it's more important that you've got the ability to make it to the runner with speed than it is that you need to get off of a 320-pound guard. How many of those are there anyway? So that's something that they wanted to talk about with SMO, but I think primarily we'll see him on special teams. Caleb Evans is the last one they were able to get to talk about. We didn't get really anything on like the other draft picks like Ty Chandler, Vidarian Lower, Jalen Naylor in the film session. Obviously in the post-draft pressers we did, but not in the film session. So with the Caleb Evans, one thing that they emphasized was that defense was not doing him any favors in the way that it was set up. It had virtually no disguise. And so quarterbacks knew immediately what they were going to do as soon as they lined up, much less after the snap. And within that framework, Evans did a good job, even though quarterbacks targeting him knew that they were primarily targeting him because of weakness they anticipated in the scheme that would exploit Evans's position on the field. And despite that, he did a pretty good job getting his hand on the ball, finding ways to split off of his coverage and freelance a little bit in positive ways. He finds a way to midpoint, if he's in cover 3 and they're running, and they know it, right? And they're running 2 deep receivers into his zone, he finds a good way to midpoint those players and close on the guy that eventually gets the target and create a pass deflection, that kind of stuff. And, they like his vertical leap, right? They like his speed. They like his length. But what they really enjoyed was the fact that he adapted to that difficult schematic situation where was it Vanderbilt, I think he went to, was not doing a lot to hide what his job was going to be on play to play. Now he is pretty raw in a lot of ways. Again, more complete scouting report in the previous episode, but they really liked that he succeeded kind of despite, these potential limitations. He's got a good eye on the quarterback and he's got a good eye on opposing offenses. He just kind of needs to not commit so many penalties all the time. So, it was a really fruitful discussion to have with the people who made the picks, having the film in front of us, the way they walked us through the way that they scouted these players. Obviously, they talked primarily about these guys' strengths. I mean, Caleb Evans was drafted in the 4th round, and the way that they talked about him, he sounded like a 2nd rounder. So they didn't talk about his weaknesses that much, but it was really cool. And that information has found its way into some of the pieces I've written. And as I'm speaking, I've got an Ed Ingram piece in the pipeline that is using some of the information that we learned from the Vikings that'll appear in that scouting report.
So it is OTA season. Yay! Well, it's beginning to, anyway. You're hearing about players holding out, Kyler Murray wanting nothing to do with his team, Baker Mayfield resigning himself to doing commercials. But there is some Vikings OTA stuff to go over. And the first thing we could mention is the guard competition. Yeah.
I'll link both of Chad Graff's notebooks over at The Athletic that covers this in a little bit more detail. But right now, it looks like, and again, this is just OTAs, right? Right now, it looks like Jesse Davis and Chris Reed are rotating at right guard. So on the first day of media availability at OTAs, I believe it was Jesse Davis playing right guard. And then on day 2, it was Chris Reed. And then the third day, which was this week of media availability, was Jesse Davis again. Or maybe it was the other way around. It's not important. They're rotating. And we haven't seen Ed Ingram play on the first team. We haven't seen Wyatt Davis play on the first team. Both of them have been on the second team. And from what I can tell, there is a little bit of rotation on the second team between the two of them. But that is more, that seems to be, I wasn't keeping as much track of that. So, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. This is not concerning to me. It's OTAs. The really important thing is that, especially with a new coach, you want as few stoppages and practices as possible and as few opportunities for mistakes to ruin a rep. And by that, I don't mean players shouldn't make mistakes, but rather if one player thinks it's a different play, it is difficult to evaluate the players that are impacted by that mistake, because now we don't know kind of if they know what their responsibilities are or how good they are at, executing this particular design, if the guard is like in the wrong spot. So I just think that there was a preference to put veterans. And again, like Lewis Seen, for example, was not playing first team safety, right? Andrew Booth was not playing first team corner. We anticipate both of them will by the time training camp ends. This is just to make sure that everybody is operating at full speed, and especially the first team that needs to get the language and terminology down as quickly as possible, move on to the next concept as quickly as possible and drill that. Make sure that you don't have any slowdowns or interruptions. And so I bet that Ed Ingram is going to have some opportunities to compete for that first team role and maybe start year one. So that is not that concerning to me. What is concerning is that Wyatt Davis is not part of that veteran rotation. That is a pretty good signal that, he might be on the outs. He may not even make the team this year. I think that is on the table. Third round pick from last year. So I keep that in mind. But, the Vikings have a number of interior offensive linemen. They don't really have a backup center. Right now, the backup center is Austin Schlottman. But I don't think Davis could, he played a little bit, or he practiced a little bit of center with the Vikings last year. I think that was just a personnel issue. I don't think they view him as an actual backup center. So you'd keep that in mind, because you don't usually keep 4 guards and a center on an NFL roster. You usually have, like 2 guards, a swing guy, which I think is probably going to be Jesse Davis that can play every position, backup tackle, which is probably going to be Oli Udoh, and maybe another backup tackle. So I don't know that's going to be there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Wyatt Davis.
So let's talk about backup quarterback for a moment. So Kellen Mond is still, I say, remnant of the Zimmer organization, forgetting, of course, that the Zimmer stuff ended just a few months ago, but still feels like a bit of a relic to that whole thing, considering he didn't play at all last year when he had the ability to.
Yeah, no, there's that concern. He did get, in the most recent OTA, the bulk of second team snaps. So it seems like there is a genuine competition. I think Vikings fans are a little bit more optimistic about his chances of earning that backup job over Sean Mannion than is potentially warranted, but we're pretty early in the offseason. They've been, over the course of OTAs, again, 3 media availabilities, rotating who is on the second team. So there's a genuine competition there. Mond is throwing the ball a little bit better than Mannion, but that is not an enormous part of the evaluation, right? He needs to be able to make sure that he's making the right reads, getting to the right person, getting rid of the ball quickly enough, and then the throwing part matters. If he identifies the wrong player, does the wrong thing, or calls the wrong protection, which we know that Sean Mannion is at least good at least in a practice environment, then the rest isn't going to matter. But it is meaningful that, on Tuesday when I was there, that Mond took a good chunk of the bulk of second team snaps. Part of that might be because Nate Stanley was not participating. He only had his cap on. He didn't have his helmet. And they might have been a little bit more comfortable rotating second team snaps if they had, an all-time third quarterback in Stanley. But instead, Sean Mannion took a bunch of the third team reps with Stanley not participating. So that might play a role too. But right now, it seems like it is an open competition for that position. I don't know kind of what the odds are for Mond, but it looks like the Vikings are just going to give him that genuine chance with the new regime.
It would be different, to be sure, and yeah. It'd be nice to see something good happen from such a high pick from last year. But let's go to wide receiver 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that KJ Osborne just has the wide receiver 3 job. I know that there's some people asking questions about whether or not somebody could leapfrog him. I don't think that's going to happen. He looks pretty comfortably ensconced as the wide receiver 3. That is going to be an important position, a more important position this year than it was in previous years because of how many more 3 wide receiver sets the Vikings will run. Wide receiver 4 and 5, it looks like it is going to be a competition primarily between BC Johnson who, again, he didn't play last year, but he has starts, right? He started for the Vikings for a good chunk of time, mostly because of injury. But like when a seventh round pick is your third receiver, either that player is massively outperforming, their draft slot, or you've got no receivers. And for the Vikings, it was a little bit of both. But I think as a wide receiver 4 that he's very viable. And then, of course, Amir Smith-Marset is the other one. Again, rookies are being put on the back burner. So it is very possible that Jalen Nailor could take, one of those spots. But right now, it very much looks like, BC Johnson and Amir Smith-Marset have really good opportunities there. So I think your wide receiver 3, 4, and 5, they're going to look like KJ Osborne, BC Johnson, Amir Smith-Marset, maybe in that order. And then if the Vikings carry a 6 wide receiver, that's probably Jalen Nailor, which, is tough for like the undrafted and the other receivers on the roster. But the Vikings have too much good enough players for somebody like Christian Jackson or Myron Mitchell or Blake Prohl to like make the roster unless the Vikings carry 7, which seems somewhat unlikely, but they don't have that many tight ends. So, it's possible.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 3 safety looks.
Yeah. So we haven't seen Harrison Smith. I imagine that has to do with the birth of his child more than it has to do with like some contract dispute we've never heard of.
Bad attitude, no hustle, things that you would immediately...
The notorious no hustle Harrison Smith. Yeah,
absolutely.
So we haven't seen him at OTAs, and so you would think that this would be a prime opportunity for Lewis Cine to be on the first team alongside Cameron Bynum, and actually no. He hasn't been on the first team. Instead, they've put out, Josh Metellus out there, and a little bit of Lewis Cine in a third safety look, but it's primarily been Josh Metellus, Cameron Bynum. I expect that that's not what they anticipate going forward. I think that Lewis Cine is probably going to beat out Josh Metellus. But yeah, and likely Cameron Bynum. Right. But it's been those 2, but the Vikings have they've already shown in OTAs 3 safety looks, and Lewis Cine comes on the field for those when the rest of the first team is out there. Those 3 safety looks have, it looks like to me anyway, taken off a linebacker. So it's just one linebacker, Eric Kendricks. But I could have maybe, I tried paying attention, but there could have been other 3 safety looks over the course of OTAs where they took off a defensive tackle instead, right? That is, on the board as well. So, but right now it looks like, they were like, hey, Jordan Hicks off the field, Lewis Cine on the field. And it gives them some opportunities where that guy might turn into the nickel corner on some snaps against, a bigger receiver or a tight end who's flexed inside. I remember Josh Metellus in 2020 as a rookie was actually doing pretty well in man coverage in camp. And so that's actually something that, based off of his film at, was it Michigan? I didn't think that he was good at, but it is something that, he demonstrated he could do. Cameron Bynum, of course, played cornerback at Cal. It's something that he's familiar with. Lewis Cine, I don't know that he's got the world's best man coverage capability, but he does have experience doing that. He does have a lot of athleticism and a lot of intelligence. So if they can nail down the technique he needs in man-to-man coverage, that's something that they can do. So they've got safeties that are going to be a little bit better in man coverage than most safeties. No like Derwin James or Tyrann Matthews or what's the Pittsburgh safety? Minka Fitzpatrick's, right, in terms of man coverage safeties. But players that have got the capability of doing it. Harrison Smith, good at a lot of things. I don't think man coverage is one of them. But they've got players that have the capability of doing it, and so they could have that out there. They mentioned that, there's going to be matchups or times where you're going to want more safeties on the field. If a team, and this is very college, but if a team consistently runs out of empty, right, or sort of empty, right? I shouldn't say empty. Out of 5-0, it looks like 5-0 pass protection with one back in the backfield. They're not going to have many blockers out there, and so they're just going to trust the running back speed and the offensive lineman speed to beat your players out there. And so you might take Jordan Hicks off the field, who is a very fast player, and instead put, Cameron Bynum on the field and know that they've got more capability of getting to sidelines or getting to their spots faster. So they might, in some circumstances, say, hey, as a run defense look, we're taking off a linebacker and putting on a safety. But I think this is primarily a way to deal with looks where you've got tight ends that are equally capable of run blocking or running a route. And knowing that offenses sometimes will check, if they put two tight ends out on the field, that looks like a run look, they'll check to a pass if they like the personnel. The Vikings will instead say, hey, you've got two tight ends on the field, we've got three safeties, we can match up those tight ends in if you're going to check to a pass, or we can beat them to the spot in the run game. So this is kind of our compromise in terms of having a look out there that deals with both fairly well.
So what exactly are they doing with Dalvin Cook right now? Because it seems to fly in the face of everything that Mike Zimmer believed.
Yeah, right, yeah. So Chad Graff reported that they've put Dalvin Cook out at wide receiver at times, as one of the receivers in a bunch set, and have him run receiver routes and stuff like that. And there's all kinds of opportunities with that, right? Like you can, motion Dalvin Cook out. You can bring CJ Ham from fullback to halfback, and then signal that you're going to pass the ball, but actually run with CJ Ham because the Vikings very much trust his ability to run the ball. So you come out in 21 personnel, right? And then it looks like you're going to run the ball. You then, motion out. So you bring Dalvin Cook out to bunch, know that your primary passing play there is probably a screen where Dalvin Cook catches the ball behind the line of scrimmage, or two receivers are blocking, and have defenses move a player out of the box to the bunch to defend the bunch, and then just run CJ Ham up the middle. That's entirely possible. They could flex other people out or in. They could say, hey, Irv Smith, now he's playing outside the numbers. We've got a receiver on the inside as their slot guy. They're playing a lot with where these players line up. And very much it seems like Dalvin Cook is going to be part of that. They really like his capability to run receiver routes. I'm maybe a little bit more skeptical of that. I think that, Dalvin Cook is a little bit overrated by Vikings fans in terms of his receiver capability. I think he's mostly an above average receiver at running back, but he's not, amazing. He's not going to turn into a Christian McCaffrey or anything like that. He's mostly fine. Right. And I don't think that he is a remarkable route runner, but all of that could change, and maybe I'm wrong. And that'd be kind of exciting to see, because that is still probably a more efficient usage of Dalvin Cook regardless. Also, the Vikings have rotated Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison and Kenny Nwangu all with the first team. Right. I haven't seen all three on the field at the same time or anything like that, but one rep Dalvin Cook lines up at running back, then he comes off the field and it's Alexander Mattison, and then the next rep, Mattison comes off the field and it's Kenny Nwangu. And I think, based off of the usage that we've seen, that we're going to see Kenny Nwangu also involved in the passing game in a pretty big way. I think they really like what he can do in space. So I think that his role is going to expand going forward. I wouldn't, like, for fantasy purposes, I wouldn't say like that he is, somebody that if Dalvin Cook is healthy that you're going to start or anything like that. But, if Dalvin Cook goes down, I think that, Nwangu's like reception capability and his total could become, pretty great in terms of, if you're looking for a handcuff. Maybe if you've got, you're in a PPR league and Dalvin Cook goes down and the Vikings have both Mattison and Nwangu, I think this is an opportunity where you can say, hey, Madison's going to get more carries and touches, but Nwangu's going to score me more points because he's going to get receptions. Those receptions might go for a couple more yards. So that is interesting. I think that they kind of like what Nwangu can do there.
So other things worth mentioning, it appears there's going to be either a punt returner competition and or a kicker competition. And
it looks like both.
Yeah, and Norse Code, longtime listeners of the show are aware of just how important the kicker is to Norse Code.
Yeah, so well, let's start with that. Let's start with the kicker competition. So they brought in, I think his name is pronounced Gabe Burkich. I just called him Gabe in pressers and let Matt Daniels, the special teams coordinator, do the rest of the work for me. He knew who I was talking about. But I'm pretty sure he said Burkich. So, they liked his leg. He had, I asked specifically what they liked about him. Obviously, they liked his leg, they liked his accuracy, but they really liked what they considered to be his performance in high pressure situations, high leverage situations. Kicked a 57-yard game winner. I didn't fact check this. This is just what they said in the presser. Kicked a 57-yard game winner for Oklahoma. So he's got, deep kick capability where he can be accurate deep. It seems like they're more comfortable having Greg Joseph kick from deep. We saw a couple of practice situations where he was kicking from 45 plus, which, the Vikings were not overjoyed with that prospect, but also sometimes you just have to. And Greg Joseph made every kick. So did Gabe Burkish, but he just didn't have as many kicks. So, maybe the competition's a little bit one-sided, but both of them did pretty well at OTAs. Remember last year, I was saying that Greg Joseph was doing awful at OTAs. He was missing a ton of these kicks. His competition, the Syracuse kicker, I want to say his name was Riley Patterson, was injured for most of the time. So it's not like the Vikings had other options, but obviously by the time the season started, Greg Joseph did a fine job. I still think it makes sense to have constant competition there. They also have a competition at punter. I did miss that, but Ryan Wright, who's the punter from Tulane, which some of the guys that helped me construct the consensus big board said was a draftable player. So he's among punters. He's like up there. He's like a 6'3", 245-pound punter, by the way. Like, he's not small. He's part of the punting competition. It sounds like Jordan Berry is most likely going to be the punter, but the philosophy that Matt Daniels has is that as many opportunities for competition you can have here is good. There's no competition at long snapper, which that's probably also good, honestly. At punt returner, they don't have an answer yet. We asked who's going to be the punt returner. They said they're looking at a couple of options. They're going to see if Amir Smith-Marset has punt return capability, because he certainly has this skill set with the ball in his hands and as a returner and as a first step guy to be a punt returner, right? Which signals, of course, that Kenny Nwangwu is just the kick returner now. But they have to know if you can track a punt, and tracking a punt is just so much more difficult than tracking a kick. We've talked about this a couple of times. Matt Daniels talked about this too. There are some movement skill differences too, which is why you see positional differences among players that play punt return and players that play kick returner. You're more likely to see, for example, a running back at kick returner and a wide receiver at punt returner, right? They are different movement skills. But primarily what they talked about was the ability to track the ball in the air, because the way those punts come off of a leg is just so different. So he's in that competition. Jalen Naylor, of course, is in the competition. I think that he mentioned a couple of other names, and I'll keep track, as they actually take punt return reps a little bit more diligently. But they've got a couple of cornerbacks in that punt return competition. And they probably put a couple of running. I don't think Kenny Nwangwu is in that competition. But they're probably going to see if Ty Chandler can do it. They did like Thomas Hennigan as who's an undrafted free agent wide receiver as a potential punt returner. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out. But obviously, ever since Marcus Sherrills was cut the first time, that's been an issue for the Vikings to try and fill. Even when Marcus Sherrills came back, it wasn't solved. So punt returner is going to be a difficult nut to crack, but it sounds like they're throwing a bunch of bodies at it.
You can't just make people like Marcus Sherrills. He's as it turns out,
born Marcus Sherrills.
Yeah, you have to be born Marcus Sherrills. You can't just become Marcus Sherrills. It's too bad.
It's innate.
Marcus Sherrills, the man who we swore was going to be a Viking till the day he died. It was going to be cockroaches, Cher, and Marcus Sherrills. That's who was going to survive the nuclear apocalypse. All right, so one of the big pieces of news over the past couple of days, I say big in quotations, it's the offseason, deal with it,
right?
Is the idea the NFL is finally sick of the Pro Bowl. They are tired of this charade, and they want to do something about it. And so the question now becomes, what should they do with the Pro Bowl? And one of our listeners had a fantastic idea. One that I want to embrace just full body. Ed Donatello asks us the question, with the league considering doing away with the Pro Bowl game, which American Gladiator games should the players engage in instead?
All of it, they should just be American Gladiators, right? Like that that year's Pro Bowl winners or Pro Bowl participants are all the American Gladiators, and some random dude who was a marathon runner in college and is now 35 with a full-time job with benefits now has
balding full
all the time, always balding, right?
Questionable amount of body hair too, like
yeah, in like weird spots that like don't really make sense. Like, that person has to now joust Aaron Donald.
Ooh, you know, I was looking at it a completely different way. I was looking at it like we should have the players be the people going on to American Gladiators, and meanwhile have the roided up people who were
I like that too, and in fact, that was the direction I was going in before, like as I was saying it, and then I was like, no,
I want to see Eric Kendricks punish a man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want to see Lamar Jackson shoot somebody with a tennis ball gun.
Yeah,
that sounds fun.
I'm totally down for that. So here are the games that I feel they should include. We'll start with Assault, which is the one that you're referring to, where they have the tennis ball guns and they're trying to shoot the target and they have to like do barrel rolls around the arena. Yeah,
the barrel rolls are important.
That I was in researching this
because the rocket launcher with like the Nerf rocket.
Yes,
God, I love it.
Always shoots a little too high. Yes.
Yeah.
In researching this, because I care about this show, and I did research on this question. The Assault, I watched a YouTube video with a former like a military weapons expert, and he was shooting all over the place. But I'll tell you what, his army crawl, top notch.
Perfect.
It cost him the win because he went the wrong way in the course, but it was in fact top notch. Absolutely, Assault should happen. We should definitely do the human cannonball. Absolutely, 100%. I want to see an offensive lineman try to take out one of the American Gladiators.
Oh, that's good. I would like to see. So this is too close to football-like activities, but they have a game, Breakthrough and Conquer, which is just kind of just a football drill, right? Where somebody has, they have to carry a football into the end zone for a touchdown, right? They have to go 15 yards, and the gladiator is in the 5-yard line and is stuck within the 5 to 0 yard line area, and all of that, all the competitor has to do is get the ball into the end zone within a certain amount of time, right? They can't be tackled, go out of bounds, or lose the ball, right? But I want the punters and kickers to be the football players.
Yes. This is what I want. Please. I have ideas. We need to make this a thing.
Yeah. So I think all of them are good. Human Cannonball, Joust is a classic. It's in every American Gladiator. You got to have it.
Joust. Here's my thought. Kirk Cousins ends up getting in because not playing in the Super Bowl.
Sure.
So Kirk Cousins ends up getting into it. And I imagine he would totally just embrace the Joust role. Like, that would be his event.
He'd get into it, yeah.
Like, oh, this is just like that Nick Cage movie where he was, and just, rattle it off. It'll be great.
It's like the Nick Cage.
Also, Powerball, where they try to put the soccer ball or whatever into the little, containers on the field. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, honestly. Like, you describe it and it's just like, it seems fine, but you watch it and it is adrenaline. Also, okay, I kind of similar to Powerball is Atmosphere, where they've got where they're all inside these spherical cages, right? These metal cages.
Yes.
And they have to get the cages into these platforms where you score points. It's like a depression.
Yep, and the smoke or whatever comes up.
Yeah, the smoke comes out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all the gladiators try to do is to get them out of the thing, and that feels like that's kind of like an offensive lineman's job. But it is so far removed that having an offensive lineman do that, I think, would be funny as hell, right? Because they don't get to like use their arms, or they have to roll a ball and figure out how to get somebody out of a particular area. But it's kind of the essence of their job. So I kind of like having offensive linemen in atmosphere. Plus, it mitigates like the thing that they're better at than other people, which is being large and strong.
Yeah, let's do O-line versus D-line for each league.
That's good. Okay, yeah. That's good.
Absolutely do that.
So yeah, all of the events, first of all, but especially the ones that we said.
Yes, if we can get the wide receivers doing the wall,
my God, yes,
that could also be entertaining. So, license to print money here, folks.
And just like have the quarterbacks do the eliminator, right?
Just doing the little the hand bike thing.
Yeah, Tom Brady never actually goes to the Pro Bowl, but like imagine Tom Brady just like doing the whole friggin' obstacle course.
Oh, Tom Brady is the right age. Tom Brady remembers this. Tom Brady would respect it. Tom Brady would be playing in the Super Bowl the next week and go, "No, honey, I am doing the Pro Bowl. You don't understand. This is how important it is to me. I get to meet Laser.
I'm going to poke Nitro right in the eyes.
I'm not being successful. Why can't I cut off their headset? Oh, it's terrible. Other options for this also. The question was out on Twitter. There were a number of great potential responses. I believe you could do a couple of different things here, including if you had the worst team in the league play the college champion. I feel like that would get amazing ratings. It would be a slaughter to answer the question, finally, that the worst NFL team is better than Bama. But people would still watch. Or another option would just be a defensive competition to see who could hit Dan Snyder the hardest.
Oh, yeah, I can't see anyone objecting to that one.
No, in fact, I can think of at least 31 other team owners who would be happy to sign off on this. Be fantastic. All right, let's go to the mailbag. First question is from the Two Stooges, who asks, "What are some of your early impressions of the Vikings rookies as people? What is your elevator pitch for why this draft class will help the organization with a quote competitive rebuild?" We've already mainly covered the first one. Let's go to the second of that.
Yeah, I guess the real quick pitch on that is the Vikings found players at positions that they don't just need right away, which they of course do, especially at cornerback. They do need some help in the secondary overall, so safety does help with that. But more importantly, they're anticipating their contract needs down the road. They're identifying which players are the oldest on their roster that will not contribute 3 years down the line. Those are players like Harrison Smith. Those are players like Patrick Peterson. And they're finding replacements for those players. At the same time, they're building out depth and breadth at some of these positions that they historically haven't been able to find. So, for example, Ed Ingram and Verdarian Lowe give them long-term options at guard that allow them to do away with some of the makeshift stuff that they're doing. The fact that they continue to build depth at cornerback with a Caleb Evans in the 4th round allows them to avoid, making one-year contracts over and over again and have some long-term answers at these positions while they still have an opportunity to develop somebody like Cameron Dantzler. So in a world where the Vikings draft strategy perfectly meets the notion of competitive rebuild, the Vikings actually do a pretty good job of not just meeting their immediate needs, which is important for the competitive part, but they're anticipating which players on the roster are the least likely to be there in the long run and finding replacements for them. There's still some movement they need to do. For example, they need a replacement for Adam Thielen long term, but they did a pretty good job of finding out which players won't be here in 2025 and finding potential solutions to resolve that issue.
So the next question is going to be from Stevie, who asks, "How does Aaron Donald's career stack up against Alan Page's, particularly when considering performance relative to his peers?"
Yeah, so back in 2014, 2015, I wanted to do this specifically to take a look at how Alan Page compared to other defensive tackles and other pass rushers around the league. And this was before Pro Football Reference actually had access to all of the sack data that that John Turley found from the pre-1982, so 1960 to 1982. year by year and often game by game. And I used all of the data that was gathered from that project to construct sack totals, year by year sack totals, peak years, non-peak years, career lengths, and all that for the most important pass rushers of every era. And so I was able to find out, for example, that Alan Page, and this was, while J.J. Watt was going strong in his 20 sack seasons, this was, again, Aaron Donald's rookie season had just concluded, right? So we had 1 year of Aaron Donald being phenomenal, not actually from a sack perspective as phenomenal as J.J. Watt, but I believe, and I'm not looking this up, I believe his Pro Football Focus rating was actually higher than J.J. Watt, which was the only time that happened, until, of course, Aaron Donald kept doing it again and again. And then J.J. Watt switched positions to the edge. Probably not running away from Aaron Donald, but more, that's just a more valuable position for him on the Texans. But, that was really fascinating work, because had J.J. Watt stayed at the interior, he would have been the only person to challenge Alan Page. So at the time when I constructed that top 10, I took a look at total sacks, total games, total years, sacks at peak moments, or the 3-year peaks, and then games and years and stuff like that. And then I took a look at how many opposing pass attempts they had. I took a look at how many sacks per 100 games they had. I took a look at the median sack rate of the years that they participated in, and what percentage over or under the NFL-wide sack rate they had, and then turned that into an expression of an equivalent 2014-16 game season. So one example would be, for example, that Alan Page, in his 3-year peak, 1974 to 1976, he only went up against 1,201 opposing pass attempts, right? That's or opposing dropbacks, I should say, because I did sacks plus pass attempts for opponents that played the Vikings. That's a big disadvantage. DeMarcus Ware actually that's a 4-year peak. So let's say Aaron Donald. Actually, let's just do that. So Aaron Donald's peak was 2018 to 2020. Aaron Donald, in the same 3-year span, goes up against 1,600 opposing pass attempts, right? So he has 400 more, right? That's basically another season on top of Alan Page, because Alan Page has about 400 a year. Aaron Donald has 1,600. So he has about another year's worth of pass attempts. But league-wide sack rates in the NFL in that season, in that span, are down. So sack rates in 1970s are much higher than they are in late 2010s, early 2020s. So you have to account for that as well. So the sack rate, for example, in Alan Page's era was 8.5% per dropback, whereas for Aaron Donald, it's about 6.3% per dropback. So I accounted for the total amount of opposing passes that they would play against over their span, what the league average sack rate was in that span, and translated that into a 2014 equivalent. The top 10 in terms of peak sack rate, their 3-year peaks, were Al Bubba Baker, Deacon Jones, Carl Eller, DeMarcus Ware, Alan Page, Coy Bacon, Derek Thomas, Richard Dent, and Claude Humphrey. I believe that was 10. All of those players were edge defenders except for Alan Page. That's insane. That's just insane. It is incredible. Now, there are some players like Leslie O'Neal and Reggie White who it was great for a long time, but his peak was never better, right? It's kind of like Jim Marshall. His peak was never better. He ended up with like 200 career sacks, so he absolutely is one of the top pass rushers of all time. But in terms of just taking a look at his best 3 or 4 or 5 year span, it was never up there in the top 10. It was just his 8-year span was unbeatable, right? So when you take a look at all of that, he's the only player that that was along the interior. Then I added Aaron Donald to that. And so 1 through 8 reads like Al Bubba Baker, Deacon Jones, Carl Eller, DeMarcus Ware, then number 5, Aaron Donald, number 6, Alan Page. They are right next to each other in their equivalent 2014-16 game season output. So Alan Page had 14.6 sacks in a 2014-16 game season, Aaron Donald had 15.8. They are right next to each other, zero point 0.8 sacks away. So that's crazy, right? In terms of their peak. In terms of their career, Aaron Donald is somewhat ahead. I shouldn't say way ahead, is somewhat ahead of Alan Page. Again, if you only look at careers in terms of sack rate, not in terms of total sack, then you get Deacon Jones number 1, Claude Humphrey number 2, Jason Taylor number 3, Leslie O'Neal number 4, Lawrence Taylor number 5, Cedric Hardman number 6, then Alan Page, Jared Allen, Reggie White, Derek Thomas. So that ends up, again, where you've only got one player along the interior, that's Alan Page. You add Aaron Donald in there. Aaron Donald is a couple of spots ahead of Alan Page. Again, they're the only two interior players in that span, but their equivalent seasons over the course of their career, single season output, 12.2 sacks for Aaron Donald, and then for Alan Page, 11.7 sacks. Very close, even closer than in terms of their peak years, even though in terms of rank, they were right next to each other. So singularly great at what they did in terms of generating sacks. Phenomenal. Both are considered to be relatively weak against the run, historically speaking. I would say that for both of their cases, that's a little bit overblown. But Aaron Donald is probably a better run defender than Alan Page. So all of that kind of put together tells you that there's really only two interior players that that really kind of pass the test in terms of career. Randy White is up there in terms of his peak. Like he's behind, the top 10, but he's up there in terms of peak interior defenders. But really, there's just not many players that are comparable to the two of them. It very much seems like, Aaron Donald might actually surpass, he probably already has, surpassed Alan Page as the best interior defender in history. And as the Alan Page guy, as a guy who has called him a personal hero of mine since before I liked football, that's a lot for me to say. But I think it might be the case. After you adjust for era, which includes things like, opponent pass rush and sack rate and, what the era was and stuff like that in terms of, what offensive linemen were allowed to do and how that, produces itself statistically. Aaron Donald is ahead. Now, of course, Alan Page has the back end of his career that he has to fight against, whereas Aaron Donald doesn't, right? The end of Aaron Donald's career, his sack rate is probably going to go down. Almost certainly. That's not the case for everybody, right? Bruce Smith, that didn't really bother him. But for most players, that's going to be at the end, right? And if that happens to Aaron Donald, then his career numbers will go down. But his peak is his peak, and he might produce a better peak later on, right? Probably not, because 20 sacks is hard to replicate. But his peak is his peak, and it is a little bit slightly better than Alan Page's peak. They're right next to each other, ranked 5 and 6. But as his career changes and progresses, and maybe at the back end of his career, maybe Alan Page's career accomplishments will surpass him. I don't know that would be enough to move Aaron Donald off of that pedestal as the top defensive tackle of all time, unless it's a super sharp drop off, which I don't see happening. But something to think about. It's hard for me to admit that sort of thing because of the respect that I have for Alan Page. But that's something to kind of put out there.
Well, let's go to Mark's question. And this is a new corner that I didn't know existed until this very second. This is from Mark. Question for Arif's: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying corner. When an NFL team is backed up to their own 1-yard line, what is to prevent them from taking countless false starts or delay of game penalties in an effort to draw the defense off sides? It's been a nagging question for me for quite some time. Number one, is there some rule in place to prevent this? And number two, if not, why don't teams do this regularly? We're gonna skip 3 because I feel like we're gonna get the answer to this pretty quickly.
Yeah, so there's no specific rule in place to prevent this, but this has been discussed. On the opposite side of the ball, defensively, when you're close to the goal line and you need to run time off the clock so that they only have one shot to make a play for the end zone. So say, for example, there's a minute left, there's no timeouts. They would have 4 plays, right? If they're inside the goal line. The clock runs, or at least when this was developed, I don't know if this is still the case, probably not. The clock continues to run after a defensive penalty. And so Buddy Ryan in the Chicago defense put in something he called the Polish goal line, which I'm sure that's racist, right? Like, I don't know that, but I'm sure it is.
Like, I don't know enough about the topic, but on its face value.
Yeah, I'm just going to assume and let someone correct me the other way.
Be pleasantly surprised if it's not.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. Where they would put 14 players on the field, have too many men on the field, and get called for that when the ball is snapped. And they would just do that again and again and again because, if you're inside the 5, gaining 3 yards, then 1 yard, and then 1 yard, and then 1 yard is whatever. And they just have to stop them on the final play when there's zeros left on the clock. That's been discussed. People think that Belichick did some version of this when he's the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants. I don't know. But there is a rule in place that prevents this kind of writ large, just not specifically, which is, the more I think about it, the more I think the Polish goal line has been essentially ruled out. But still, that sort of thing is under the broad category of palpably unfair acts, which I believe has never been called in an NFL game, but has been called several times in college games. And in the rule book, a palpably unfair act is an act that the NFL referees determine is palpably unfair to the game of football, I believe is the description of it. There's not like this is what it means. This is an example.
This is basically the the game's version, not the players, the game's version of giving them the business.
Exactly. And the most famous example is the 1954 Cotton Bowl, Rice versus Alabama. Rice had the ball on its own 5-yard line. They swept around the right end, streaked down the Alabama sideline, and there was essentially no chance that a Bama player was going to get him. Rice was probably going to win the game because, again, it's 1954 and they're already winning 7-6. If they score a touchdown, that's probably it. Alabama's Tommy Lewis, who describes himself as having been too full of Bama, jumps off the bench and knocks the runner down at the Alabama 40. Remember, he's jumping off the bench, right? The referee, pointing to Lewis and the bench, awards a touchdown to Rice. The palpably unfair act, so a non-player shall not commit any act which is palpably unfair. So the referee, after consulting with the crew, which technically in this case did not happen, he just made the ruling, shall make such a ruling as they consider equitable. So they can just declare an act palpably unfair to the game of football and then determine what the resolution of that is. So you could have a player ejected from the game, disqualified, right? Or you could award a touchdown, or you could award the game to a player or to a team. This has never happened in the NFL. It's happened a couple of times in college. That was the most famous example. That is the remedy for that kind of chicanery, essentially. Technically, there was a palpably unfair act before the Rice one, but the rules didn't allow. The rules were just like, you get 5 yards. Like, this game is so unfair that you get 5 yards. Okay.
I'm just imagining Rice going, really? We had 5 yards for that? The dude came off the bench and decked the player.
Yeah, so they changed the rule before that Rice game at some point between 1921 and 1954. Where you can make whatever ruling you want. So the ref did the right thing. He just, like, according to the rule book, he could pursue whatever remedy he thought was fair. But before 1921, the ref could just say that was fundamentally unfair to football. 5 yards. So So they changed that at some point between 1921 and 1954 and allowed, that's obvious. That's obvious. You got to give him a touchdown. That's obvious, right? So, there is a remedy in the NFL rulebook that has never been used before called the Palpably Unfair Act. The referee can determine what that remedy is. In the Polish goal line tactic scenario, I would say give him the touchdown, right? In the inverse, which is the question that was asked, I would say end of the game, right? It's the opposite, right? Because the offense is backed up and whatever. I would say that you would award the safety or whatever, right? Because they're taking advantage of the fact that you cannot be penalized into a safety. Just award the safety and put some time back on the clock, and they could just do that. So yeah, that is my solution, which is in the rule book.
The fact that we get to bring up an obscure rule in football doesn't happen nearly enough on the show than it should. Like this should not be the first time. We should have an Arif's obscure football rule corner that we just break out once a month and be like, by the way, did you know that you can't throw pink marital devices onto the field? If you're a fan, and just go from there, it'd be fantastic. David asks, stocks. Actually, I feel like that should be the end of it, but stocks. I think our general manager is using his stock background with this draft, even though I don't know how he sold or bought. I'm assuming he's a gatherer of stocks with the 10 picks. With his big money, he likes the potential. With a big bang, he likes something that would be hard to lose value. Might go up a little, but could also make you some crazy money with the first 2 picks. Third and fourth rounder, that's where he puts his marginal money. These stocks have a chance to be destructive. It's the ones that he must have like crazy variance in the past, but has a chance to be a huge or big get if they end up hitting at the right time. If they tank, well, you lose money, but you have a chance to make it up. Rounds 5 through 7, this is where he likes the steady ship, some potential to be a decent value, but if you lose some money, it's cheap money you'll make back in rounds 1 through 4. What do you think?
Yeah, whatever. Sorry, David. I know that you spent a lot of time trying to get this question in. I don't love this interpretation for a couple of reasons. One, I don't know that any GM views the first 2 rounds any differently than the way that you described. So I don't know that a stock background would do that. But in particular, I would say that second pick does not fit the quote something that would be hard to lose value, right? Because the concern with Andrew Booth is his injury history, and it's very easy to lose value when somebody gets injured or has that extensive injury history. So I would say that you actually do have that. But I think any general manager would love the idea of something where it's hard to lose value, but if you hit, you could hit big. That I think is kind of normal. The third and fourth rounder stuff, I don't know, the way that you were describing it is kind of a high variance middle of the road stock. I don't know, for example, that Ed Ingram is that kind of player. I don't know that his ceiling is crazy high. Again, any player has a really high ceiling in a vacuum, right? Because you don't have to be the most athletic player in the world to be the best receiver in the NFL, the best guard in the NFL, the best quarterback in the NFL, the best safety in the NFL. But it helps, right? And it improves your odds of being one of those players that has, the best receiver in the NFL kind of background, right? Like Randy Moss and Terrell Owens were both the best receivers in the NFL when they were playing. But so was Jerry Rice, and he was just an above-average athlete as opposed to an elite athlete. And for his time, Jerry Rice was an above-average athlete, despite kind of the way that people talk about him and his 40-yard dash. So anybody can hit a ceiling where they're the best at their position, but you're more likely to do that if you're a good athlete. And Ed Ingram is not really that. I mean, he ran a great 10-yard split. His 40-yard dash is better than most guards in his position, but the rest of his workouts were very whatever, especially the vertical, which is, I think, 20 and a half inches is the lowest that I've seen in a while for a player invited to the combine. So I don't know that that's actually a really good description of the way the third and fourth rounders worked out. Caleb Evans kind of fits that. Brian Asamoah kind of fits that, but I wouldn't say that Ed Ingram fits that. Now, the 5th to 7th round stuff, it does seem to be kind of penny stock behavior, the way he approached those late rounds. But, we've only got one draft to work with. And a lot of teams picked with that in mind, right? Like it wasn't like they pick there were a bunch of teams that picked people with crazy high ceilings in the 5th to 7th round, with very low floors. A lot of them picked guys that universally, all of their picks were like guys that can contribute on special teams right away, and then if they turn into a starter, great, right? So I don't know that this is all that different from the way that you described Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. I don't think that this is a great description of how his stock market background played a role in the way that the draft played out, because I think this describes a lot of the teams and a lot of the ways that a lot of the teams approach the draft. And in the areas where it doesn't, I don't think the Vikings fit that mold either, right? Because, at a bare level, he likes something that'd be hard to lose value, but might go up a little and make you crazy money. I feel like everybody likes that, right? And I think a lot of GMs pursued that in the first 2 rounds anyway. So I don't know that this is the best way to get across that he has that financial background.
Well, let's go to Charlie G, who asks, do you think that O'Connell will cope with the mental anguish of the kicker curse better or worse than Zimmer?
I don't know that there's a lot of people that could cope worse. So you've got, that's kind of a difficult bar to clear. But there's like a bunch of things that O'Connell is clearly a young coach that is not fully experienced with being a head coach yet. And it's a lot of small things, some of which I can't share. But, his time allocation, in terms of what he does as a head coach versus when he was a coordinator, that, continues to need to change. He's got to have, more of a mindset where he is managing the entire team as opposed to one individual asset. And that's not me saying he focuses on the offense more than the defense. That's actually not the case at all. He, in fact, makes specific time to get over to the defense and figure out what's going on and coaching those players and stuff like that. But rather kind of finding out where his time needs to be spent and stuff like that. And so I think that there's going to be a bit of a learning curve just being a responsible head coach. And I don't mean that he's irresponsible, but rather what it means to take responsibility. And then on top of that, dealing with the kicker curse. I think that, again, we haven't played any games with him as a head coach, so all of this could change at a moment's notice. But I think that, honestly, he's just going to be optimistic through it. Like the kicker curse is going to strike, and he's going to be like, well, there's next year. As a team, we're always looking for opportunities to improve ourselves. We think that, Greg Joseph really availed himself well to the Vikings. I really like his process. I really like the way that he took it on the chin and the way that he keeps his head up. We love, the mindset that he has as a kicker. You definitely need that. And he's going to be blindsided in year 2 when the exact same thing happens. So, I think that starting optimistic and having that cut out from under you, that's a much harder fall. And we'll see kind of how he handles that year 2, year 3. But, for the first year, he's probably just going to be optimistic through it.
It's too bad that we have this terrible curse, but I will say that the USFL is successfully filling the hole in my soul as far as missed field goals and missed kicks is concerned. It's
so many missed kicks, and like coaches are just saying F it and going for the 3-point conversions.
Yep,
it's wonderful.
It truly warms the cockles of my heart. Elizabeth, sure. Let's do that. Arif, what do you think the Seahawks are going to do for quarterback this preseason?
What a random team to ask me about. I don't know anything about the Seahawks. I don't think they'll do anything. They'll probably stick with Geno Smith and Drew Lock or whatever.
Anytime you have the ability to stick with those 2 quarterbacks, you have to take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there's a Colin Kaepernick working out for a team or anything like that.
As a distraction for something else happening to the team, no. Not
just 2 other things happening to that team. I think because it's not just the John Gruden suing the NFL. I think there's also a thing with I'm going to Google this before I say it out loud and put myself in trouble. So just to make sure that that's happening.
While you're doing that, here's what happened: a day in the life of the PR person for the Las Vegas Raiders, which their stadium, after riding by it in a cab, boy, that is an impressive video wall. and very, very dark.
I was actually in the stadium because of the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So
as in, it's a crazy, interesting stadium. Not like, wow, I can't believe a football writer was in a football stadium.
No, that, as it turns out, super common. But when it comes to the day in the life of the Raiders PR person, today it was announced unexpectedly that they're going to be letting Colin Kaepernick do a tryout with the team. Great. Cool. It's been about 5 years or so since he actually had any form of contact with the team that was more than just, I'm working out in the middle of a college field somewhere. But yeah, cool.
If you want to come and watch, come and watch.
Yep. Cool. Great. Sure. Why not? It was later revealed today that the Gruden lawsuit is going to be a little bit more widespread and like there's more news about the actual like lawsuit coming out.
The NFL moved to dismiss the lawsuit, and a judge denied. Well, it might be several lawsuits, but the judge denied the NFL's motion to dismiss either one or all of the suits. So it is moving apace.
I'm aware that it's a very cynical view to believe that the team or the NFL is using Colin Kaepernick in order to wag the dog and distract us. I'm very well aware of it, and I'm still saying it. Like, I cannot think of a more blatant, non-Washington football team way of doing this.
You're right. Speaking of Washington football team, I did find that story. It was from May 6th. It was 3 weeks ago. Former team president Dan Ventrell announced made an abrupt departure, right? And there were accusations made. Dan Ventrell claims that multiple female employees made complaints about Mark Davis. So you see why I wanted to triple check this one before I said it on air. So, again, that was 3 weeks ago, but that case could continue making its way down the pipeline. And in that scenario, I think it would be smart from a PR perspective. The smartest thing is to never do it, right? But smart from a PR perspective to maybe curry some favor from the media at large, which, normally I wouldn't say, the woke media loves this kind of story, but it seems like the media is on the side of Kaepernick now. At least a lot of the football media is, for the media at large to give Colin Kaepernick a chance, which, let me be clear, I thought he deserved a chance 6 years ago, right? Like everyone understands kind of what my stance on Colin Kaepernick is. If you haven't, hi, my name's Arif Hassan. Thanks for listening to the podcast for the first time.
Announcing this on the 2-year anniversary of George Floyd too. Just
right, yeah, like Jesus, right?
I don't think you can.
And the Raiders still have the tweet up, right?
Yes, they do.
I can retweet from the Derek Chauvin trial. My brain. Anyway,
the phrase "hat on a hat" exists for a reason. Like, I'm just pointing this out.
So there's all of that. This stance was that the official stance of Arif Hassan and probably of Norse Code is that Colin Kaepernick was blackballed from the league. It was unfair from like a moral perspective, and obviously, companies are free to do what they want. And what they did was open to a lot of public criticism, and should have been, right, because the companies were wrong when they did what they wanted to do. But yeah, and they probably engaged in a legal collusion that is hard to prove in a court of law. And Colin Kaepernick was robbed of 6 years of his football career. And I think that right now he doesn't have it because he is 6 years removed from the game of football. And you don't always get to have it back. Sometimes you don't play football for 6 years and that's it.
Yeah.
Like
not everybody is a Michael Vick situation where he's able to go back, but that was only what? 2 or 3 years?
I think it was 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was the example I used like 4 years ago when I was like, hey, give him a shot. Right. But 6 is a lot.
Yeah. There's an unfortunate amount of time there. And the only way you can get it back is with a time heist. And I just don't think we're there yet technologically.
Yeah. If we inevitably get there, we can
make time at that point. Yes, but
right. Yeah.
Not the point. But yeah, a day in the life of the PR person for the Raiders. So there's a lot of rough stuff going on there. All right, let's go to Midwest Tropical. Why not? Everyone is doing QB rankings, so who are your top 5 QBs in the NFC and AFC, and why do you hate Kirk so much?
I mean, it's a deep personal bias, right? It's irrational.
It's the van. You just can't get behind the van. It's fine.
Yeah, I can't get behind the van. So I'm going to not do work, and I'm just going to steal Derek Clausen's tier list that he posted on Twitter 6 hours before we recorded, 10 hours before we recorded. And in his elite tier are Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Josh Allen, which I don't know, maybe Justin Herbert one is an interesting question because he's only been in the league for 2 years. But I think that for the most part that's fine. So that's 3 AFC quarterbacks: Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes. Who are the other AFC quarterbacks? Maybe Joe Burrow. I think that you could put him in that conversation. Lamar Jackson, of course, is in the conversation. And I don't know. Then after that, it gets kind of tough. Probably Russ, right? Maybe Tannehill. So that's kind of where the AFC is. The NFC, he listed both Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. Fine. He also listed Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford in the great tier. I don't know that I put Stafford that high, but good season, just won a Super Bowl. It's easy to kind of give him some of that credit. And then in very good, he lists Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's tough, right? Because the first half of the year, he's putting up MVP numbers, and the last half of the year, you're kind of wondering where it went. And then you get to there's your Kirk Cousins, and then after that, it's not a lot of NFC quarterbacks left after that.
It all goes off a cliff after Kirk Cousins.
So would I rather have Matthew Stafford than Kirk Cousins? We've had 3 podcast episodes dedicated to that very concept. Yes, find those episodes if you want more detail. Similar logic, actually, for Kyler Murray. He's a high variance quarterback, and if he is at an equivalent talent level or even a little bit below, he is more likely to overcome bad odds, which are very common in the playoffs, and become the best quarterback on the field. Whereas Kirk Cousins is the most likely to be the level of quarterback that he is that day, right? He is more likely to just show up and beat Kirk Cousins, whereas Matthew Stafford has an opportunity to show up and beat Patrick Mahomes for half a game, and sometimes that's all you need. So the quarterbacks I'd rather have, probably Matthew Stafford's up there. Is Dak Prescott a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins? Yes. So I guess Kirk Cousins is out of the top 5. So the quarterbacks I named is with Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray. Yeah, I guess those are probably the top 5 in the NFC, but God, I hate the NFC.
Yeah, the NFC.
Two or three of those quarterbacks should not be in a top 5.
Yeah, it's an odd list. You and I had a very long, slightly inebriated conversation when we were putting down sports bets. One of the evenings for Dusty's bachelor party, and I want it to be said for the record that Arif and I are literally, not figuratively, literally betting against Carson Wentz this year.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
I believe we picked them to be. Well, I have the ticket here on my desk. Actually, I'm confident now that I'm.
It was great because we were working around, we put up 10 potential bets. We're working around. James had drunkenly inserted a 20, so that's all we were working with, and so we had to figure out with the bet minimums and because initially we wanted to do a round robin, and it's that 20 is not going to cover a round robin with bet minimums. And so we had to pare it down a bunch, and we ended up with 3 bets basically.
Yeah,
and one of the bets that always had to be on the table was betting against Carson Wentz.
Yeah, just the idea that we could literally be betting against Carson Wentz, that needed to be a thing, and it was. We took the under on their wins for the year.
Hell yeah.
We also took the under on the Bears wins for the year as well.
Yep.
So that was. Those were the two big ones.
Sorry, Justin Fields, they didn't help you at all.
No, they absolutely did not. So we'll see if that pays out, and if that does, maybe we'll end up in Chicago. But It was fun to literally be betting against Carson Wentz. I am enjoying that. By the way, shameless plug. Well, not really shameless. I'm not going, but I sent you a link to it. Apparently Carson Wentz has a charity. Let's see, the Carson Wentz Foundation. Is that it? The Carson Wentz Foundation apparently is playing a celebrity softball game over in Fargo, North Dakota on June 21st.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, we could pregame it. We have a history in the Fargo area. We have supporters in the Fargo area. We could see Carson Wentz, quarterback of the Washington Commanders, and your favorite former North Dakota State Bison football players competing in a home run derby, nine inning game, and so much more at this family-friendly event.
Who, pray tell, are my favorite former NDSU Bison football players?
That's an excellent question. I don't have an answer for that. But that so that's a thing if you end up in the Red River Valley on June 21st. The Carson Wentz Foundation is the Facebook page. You'd be wanting to look up for that. But I wanted to mention that because it seems like a good enough cause. And, you know... Yeah,
I'm sure it's a good cause.
Bored, maybe Arif finds his way up there. Could bored or looking for a couple of drinks over at Duffy's. Let's go to R. Menson, who asks, the way I see it, there are only two possibilities next season. The Vikings are successful, and it's obviously because Cousins is an elite quarterback and Zimmer wasted multiple years of his prime. Or the Vikings are not successful, and it's because the QB wins are obviously a legitimate statistic, and Cousins is just a losing QB, and screwed Zimmer, who is otherwise a Super Bowl caliber coach. Which totally rational Twitter group, Zimmer stands or Cousins stands, will be vindicated this year?
Zimmer stands. I will not explain further.
I feel like we just did. Also, a couple times a year, Arif's esteemed New York Times colleague Michael Russo has the Wild's GM on his podcast for a one-on-one interview. While he obviously keeps his cards close to his chest, he's also surprisingly candid and takes fan questions, which is really cool for accessibility, accountability, and I think helps keep fans engaged and supportive. Would Kwesi ever consider doing something like this? What Patreon level would it take to get him on Norse Code?
If you, the listeners, donate more to the Patreon at a substantial degree, I will make a good faith effort to make this happen. That's like nice and vague, right?
Yes, that fairly non-committal too. Like,
yeah, perfect.
If you reach a threshold that I will not say aloud,
right? I will try.
I will pitch the idea to his secretary, and we'll see where we go from there.
I will say that the Vikings PR staff is, I shouldn't say much more open because it's the same PR staff, but rather I've been given the green light to be much more open in terms of availabilities for like the general manager and the head coach and stuff like that. So it is more likely with this regime than the last regime. I'll say that.
All right. Let's go to Ryan, who asks, which two players from the last two Spielman drafts do you think could find a bigger role in these new schemes?
Justin Jefferson, real breakout year coming for him. I don't know. Two Spielman drafts makes it like kind of funny because it's like, well, KJ Osborne broke out last year. Justin Jefferson broke out in game 3 of his rookie season. Ezra Cleveland kind of found his role in this offense. So it's difficult to say any of them. I do not see Nate Stanley, who I have to remind you was a draft pick and not an undrafted free agent. A draft pick. I don't see him making the team. I don't see Kyle Hinton making the team. I don't see Blake Brandel, doing more than being a backup tackle if he makes the team, which, very well could. I wouldn't be surprised or anything like that. So it leaves only the defensive players from 2020 as well as the 2021 draft class. And we're not going to include Christian Darrisaw, right? And I just talked about why Wyatt Davis is not really going to be in a position to do much. So you're left with offensively, Kellen Mond, Kene Nwangwu, unless I'm missing someone. I think those are the only 2021 players out of both of those draft classes, right? And I did talk about Kene Nwangwu, so let's say that's one of them, right? Kellen Mond has a real opportunity to be quarterback too, so he's kind of one of them. But defensively, you've got James Lynch, who I think is purpose built for this kind of system, right? Because he played as a 3-4 end he's a 4-eye at Baylor, right? That was the role that he played. Now he led the FBS in pressures and maybe also sacks, but definitely pressures. And he had a really high pressure rate as well. So it wasn't just because he saw a lot of pass attempts. So the Vikings did make him gain a lot of weight and become a nose tackle. And sometimes you can't get it back, right? I just talked about this with Colin Kaepernick. Sometimes you just can't get it back. So, who knows, right? But this is a system that's like really well built for what he does and what he can do. So I would say that he is a candidate for that. Jalen Twyman is a candidate to make an impact. I don't know that the system's perfect for him, but he didn't see the field at all last year. So he's got an opportunity to really kind of make up some ground there. Chaz Surratt, I think, also has that opportunity, but we've got to see him make, special teams duty more often. The Vikings drafted a linebacker essentially to replace. The Vikings switched to a system where they need fewer linebackers and then drafted a linebacker. Like the opportunities for Surratt are not remarkable. I'll just say that. And then, obviously, you could take a look at Cameron Dancer. We're going to ignore him for now. Josh Metellus, I think, is just, he's being cut out. So you're left with Troy Dye and Kenny Willekes from 2020, and Cameron Bynum from 2021, Patrick Jones from 2021, Junius Robinson from 2021. I think that aside from James Lynch, your best opportunities come from Patrick Jones, right? Because I think that he is basically... I think he might overtake DJ Wanham, right, as the primary pass rusher. He's got an opportunity there. Now, he has to demonstrate that he can drop into coverage from time to time. That's going to be an element of the system that he has to embrace, which is not something the Vikings were looking for when they drafted him. But I think that he's got that opportunity. I think he's got the capability. So he's probably going to be kind of the next player on the list. It's Kenny Nwangwu, and then to some degree Patrick Jones and Kellen Mond, and James Lynch. Those are the four I'm going to identify as players from the last two draft classes that have not established themselves in some way, but have an opportunity ahead of them, whether that's because of the system that the Vikings have transitioned to or the personnel choices the Vikings have made along the way.
Well, let's also go to Ryan, who asks, do you have any good chicken thigh, preferably boneless, skinless recipes? Been on a kick for my lunch meal prep and looking for some ideas.
Yeah, so at one point, my set it and forget it meal was Alton Brown's 40 cloves and a chicken recipe from way back. Like this is back when it was like Good Eat Season 4 or something like that. So like way back. The original recipe was one whole chicken cut into 8 pieces, right? And the link that I'm going to put in the show notes uses like a casserole pan, but in the show, I think you just used a cast iron pan. And that's what I did. I used a cast iron pan. But eventually I went from a whole chicken to like 8 chicken thighs and then 6 chicken thighs and then 2 chicken thighs. And I would just adjust the timing and the amount of garlic and thyme, right? But it is first infinitely adjustable, right? You can scale up or down as long as you've got a vessel big enough. But also absolutely incredible, super low effort. I had a searing step to it, which doesn't always happen in these versions of the recipe. But I sear the chicken in the cast iron, preheat the oven to 350 degrees, and after searing both sides, remove it from the burner, and then just you add oil. I add a little bit of butter. That's not in the original recipe. Thyme, and then a whole bunch of garlic cloves, right? The recipe is called 40 cloves in a chicken. For a whole chicken, it's 40 cloves. Just weigh out how much meat you're using and then adjust the number of cloves to that. And I've used it mostly with skin on thighs, but I have also used it with skinless thighs. I've not used it with boneless thighs, but thigh meat is so forgiving. Which is why I use it with thigh meat. It's so forgiving. And so long as you've got a good understanding of the temperature that you have, and maybe you should have a probe thermometer to make sure you get it right the first couple of times. Because the original recipe is like 1.5 hours. When I got it down to like 4 thighs, it ended up being half an hour, maybe 20 minutes in the oven. But it's so forgiving. It remains moist. It remains tasty, even if you over undershoot it. It's the exact opposite of a chicken breast. So That's the recipe I use. It can be as low as 20 minutes. I think without skin or bones, the cooking time is going to be faster. So it might even be, 15 minutes in the oven. Again, make sure you've got a good understanding of the temperature. You just have to make sure you let it rest a little bit before you eat it. And you can put it over any starch, right? You can put it over rice, it tastes good. Over mashed potatoes, it tastes good. Couscous, it tastes great. But the great thing about it is you can pour some stock in at the end and make a sauce out of that. And it is just delicious. And not as garlicky as you'd think, because the garlic's cooking for so long, it just kind of infuses it with a soft flavor.
I tend to use chicken thighs in chicken fried rice. And for whatever reason, I've been on a chicken fried rice thing like lately. So I've been, what I'll do is I'll cook up or grill, just grill some chicken thighs, and then serve it with regular rice, or just save it with some day old rice and toss it with that and the usual items you would use. Say the usual accoutrement, grabbing a shallot, grabbing some green onion, and some eggs, and just properly frying it up in a wok, and it tastes fantastic. So that tends to be my go-to, and it's a great egg fried rice is also a great thing for just I've got meat that I just need to use that I have sitting in the fridge, so it can work for you. I think.
Chicken thighs are so versatile.
Yeah, there's plenty of options there. Burrito Bill asks, since the Vikings are moving to a 3-4 defense, do you see this being a challenging shift for certain players new to the system? And are there any players that you see this as being a bad fit for the new defense?
As a bad fit, I mean, any of the edge rushers that don't have baseline capability to drop backwards a little bit or drop or buzz to the flats in coverage, that's going to be really tough for them, right? Like the cornerbacks and the safeties, they'll have to do stuff that looks very similar to the stuff that they've done in the Vikings system previously. Like it's going to be a different coverage scheme and a different defense, but it is very similar in terms of the skill sets it demands. So if they were bad fits before, they'll be bad fits now. The defensive linemen, the interior defenders, again, they're going to have to be doing some different things, right? They're going to have to make sure that they can play a gap and a half, that they can play with a little bit more long arm capability, that in the run game, they're not as willing to penetrate and stuff like that. It's going to ask different things of them technically, but physically, the Vikings profile that they've targeted there is actually a fairly good fit for the system. It's the edge rushers that might be kind of the biggest concern. So whether or not DJ Wanham has the ability to drop back in coverage, and I am a little bit skeptical of his capability of doing that. I'm a little bit of a DJ Wanham hater, so take that with a grain of salt. But I don't know that this is a great system for him, right? Janarius Robinson, I think, has some experience there, so it might be I don't know exactly what was completely demanded of him at Florida State, but his body type is fine for that. His wingspan is great for that. But it's really the ability to kind of go backwards. I don't know that Kenny Willekes was asked of that in Michigan State, so I don't know that a lot of these players will have the full range of capabilities that'll be asked of him at edge rusher, and we might see kind of maybe all of the backups next year may not have their job in 2023. Maybe the Vikings will have to find additional depth at edge rusher. So that's, I think, going to be the biggest question that you'll have about whether or not the Vikings will be able to retain some of those players.
Also from Burrito Bill, what would a power ranking of the best topics on Arif's corner look like, and why is beekeeping at the top? Well, beekeeping is obviously beekeeping is obviously number one because of how seriously Arif treats the beekeeping corner, despite the fact that he's not the host or host emeritus that keeps bees.
Yeah, right. Of the three people associated with Norse Code, the one that keeps bees, A, exists, but B is not me. So yeah, that's interesting. The beekeeping corner is the top one because it clearly produces the most absurd content for us. I've really liked James's relationship corner. That one's been good. Arif's parenting corner is a classic. I feel like it deserves a spot somewhere in the top 5.
It does. I wouldn't be passive aggressive without saying the passive aggressive corner is not getting respect, but
right. Yeah. One could, say, what about the passive aggressiveness corner? Have we considered that enough?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe maybe we should think about its contributions to the show a little bit before we dismiss it, um, let's make sure that we give it its due. So the passive aggressiveness corner has been a pretty good one. That's produced some pretty good content. The Dawn corners are all bottom tier, of course. Those are all awful corners.
Yeah, those are corners that you should avoid.
Yeah. But those are good. The pet corner was fine for a little bit, but I think it lost steam for a pretty good reason. So maybe that one's not top 5. The corners that are alliterations, those have been pretty good, like the corner and the Reefs corner. Those have all been pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. Are there other ones that we should put out there?
The tongue twister corner has always been fun thing that I don't hate in the least and would not.
We all love it. Everyone here loves it.
Arif is trying to tell you to send more in. I am grimacing. So yes, let's go to Euleron over on Discord, who asks, has KJ Osborne reached his ceiling? If not, what is it?
I don't think that he's reached a ceiling. I think that he can develop into a wide receiver 2, into a starting receiver, and maybe could overtake Adam Thielen long term. Remember, Adam Thielen wasn't Adam Thielen till like year 4, right? Like 2013, he was on the practice squad. 2014, he finally makes the team. But as a personal punt protector, they start using him a little bit in special teams in interesting ways. And then 2015, he wasn't even considered as a potential starter, right? Because it was Charles Johnson, Cordero Patterson, and then eventually Diggs took over. It was it 2016 until Adam Thielen was consistently Adam Thielen. Now that is partially because he was not even an undrafted free agent; he was a tryout. He didn't start more than 2 games until 2016 when he started 10. That's when he got 967 yards. So 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 4 years for Adam Thielen, right? So that is probably the longest, what's the phrase, time horizon for a player. That's kind of the other end of it. But, year 3 for a wide receiver that broke out kind of in year 2, I think that that's possible. I think that we'll probably know KJ Osborne's ceilings by the end of this year. And if he can produce, he produced 650, 700 yards last year, a good chunk of touchdowns. If he can produce a little bit more in an offense, a little bit more designed to get that third receiver the ball, we'll see if he can turn into a starting receiver, or if he's going to constantly be an interesting depth player, which, either of those is on the table. So I don't think he's reached the ceiling. I think the ceiling is going to be something along the lines of a starting receiver that is going to be, a great complementary receiver to a highlight wide receiver 1 somewhere, right? And if he hits that ceiling, it's going to be hard for the Vikings to retain him. But this year would be a good year for him to kind of make good on the meteoric leap that he had in year 1 to 2. So I don't think that we've seen it. And again, ceiling is just a statement of kind of what the most likely good outcome is. I'm not saying that he's absolutely going to hit it, right? But one could, I think, reasonably expect a level of improvement. If he stays at this level, that's fine. The Vikings have gotten, I think, what they needed out of a 5th round pick from him. If he continues to be a 650, 700 yard receiver, phenomenal, right? The Vikings are in a really good spot. But, there's more available for him. And I think that he could be a starting receiver, even though I think that there's not a ton of momentum for believing that that's where he can go. I think that his skill set actually puts him there.
Let's go to, also from Euleron, rather. How old is too old to have a huge sports flag in your bedroom?
So when I first saw this question, I didn't see in your bedroom. I just kind of assumed, for whatever reason, prominently displayed. And so my answer was, there's not a too old, there's an age range, right? And between the ages of 25 and 45, can't have it. But older than 45, no one cares. Younger than 25, you don't care. So that's fine. But then James was like, well, the key operative phrase here is in your bedroom. And that changed the tenor of the conversation.
Sure did.
Because, 45 plus, you could have a giant flag, team flag in your man cave. My answer is then it's not a specific age, but rather when you begin to take things seriously, either a relationship or a career or in our limited capitalist hellscape, those are the only two things you can really pursue. But like,
same,
those are
same.
Yeah. So that's kind of where you're at. It's like, as soon as you start dating someone and you think that they might be the one, and you've had to suffer the indignity of them seeing your giant Vikings flag in your bedroom a couple of times, you can show character growth to them. You can show that you're becoming the person they want to be with long term by just taking down that flag. And maybe you can save it and keep it for the man cave you'll eventually build for when you're 45. But taking that down and showing that you're serious about having a shared space together, that they can have a stake in, and that you're taking life more seriously than a college sophomore. Probably also take down that Fight Club poster and the Godfather poster too. Just putting that out there.
Scarface can stay up another year.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's true.
The Pink Floyd backs you'll consider
they
that.
Really, it depends on your vibe, and you're going to be the least credible person to determine what your vibe is.
Oh,
the Pink Floyd stuff is tough.
And also whether or not it's a blacklight poster. Like that's all, like a fuzzy blacklight poster, like that counts.
Right. Yeah. So you're going to have to be open to other people's interpretations of the energy you give off when it comes to the Pink Floyd stuff. So yeah, that's my answers is when you start taking life seriously. And maybe your life is on a trajectory where you never have to take it seriously. And dope. Fantastic for you.
It's all right.
Then you can have the team flag up.
And sometimes it's okay, Arif has his Eve 6 poster up and his girlfriend hasn't complained yet, so
I mean, she knows they follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, this is these things are known.
Yeah, like it's someone told her, and it was maybe me.
This was likely a running around the house. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! So to piggyback off of Arif's response, when your significant other starts to leave items in your home, like in your sink or in your shower, this is probably a time to, maybe I can do this, whatever. But
yeah, and to James's point, leaves items in your home, and it's not like a ploy, right? Oh, I left my sweater at your place, I have to go back and get it. No, like leaves items in your home with the plan of using them regularly because they occupy a space with you. The understanding that they're developing.
That said, and I feel the need to point this out, since we're gonna go into like full on off football stuff here in a second. I do want to point this out. I had a friend, because my younger brother is a bit of an artist or plays one on TV, and made me a fantastic oil painting of Zoidberg from Futurama.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was fantastic. It's, of all the things I no longer have, that's right at the top of the list as the things I wish I still had access to. I'd be willing to barter. I'd be willing to trade with people I don't like in order to get that back. But so I showed him this and he was like, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Well, at the time, this fellow was either single or had just started being in a relationship with somebody. And he asked me, well, if I have this idea for a large oil painting, could your brother do it? And I said, probably. I'd have to run it by him, but sure, I'm sure we could commission something. And he showed me a picture, and I don't know if you're familiar with this episode of South Park, but it was the Go God Go episode, and it was a picture of Mrs. Garrison, and then the atheist in the background, like on the big wall. And it was like for the big oil painting, he wanted that with Mrs. Garrison at the foot of the bed, at the feet.
Is that where Richard Dawkins has sex with Mrs. Garrison?
Yes, that is the exact episode. Yes.
Oh.
And so he asked me if my younger brother would do this. And Victor said, yes, I would do it. Here's the price, and negotiated it. And I brought it into work because the guy was a coworker at the time, and it was this massive oil painting. I forget how much it was, but it was a significant amount of money for guys in their 20s. And he was so proud of this thing, he hung it proudly in his at his home that he was sharing with like a couple of guys. Well, he starts dating this girl, and she makes it abundantly clear how much she does not want this portrait anywhere near anything of hers. But
no way.
Eventually relents and decides, and they find a place for it. And as far as I know, the last time I talked to him, which was like 2 years ago, he still had it despite having 2 kids and marrying this woman. So you can occasionally get away with it. But
but like the question isn't can you get away with it? It is what is appropriate.
Just when should and the question here, well, he paid more money for this than like 100 flags. So, well, maybe 50 flags. So
there is that.
You do have to weigh that.
It's a commissioned piece of art. Yeah, that is important context, right? Because I thought you were going to go, well, so does it change if you've got a unique custom piece of art that is the team flag? And I was going to say, yes, absolutely, that changes it. And always context will modify these things, but you have to be careful how much you're willing to go. But man, that is the line right there of like how much context can modify a thing. Yes. That's wild.
Yeah. So the moral of the story here is,
yeah.
If you're going to get an oil painting of something wholly inappropriate, make it large enough where you get to have the argument as to whether or not it should remain because of how much you ended up paying for it.
Boy. All right. I'm glad that question led to that story.
the things you know. Speaking of which, if anybody's interested in commissioning a picture, no, I'm not gonna go that route. But let's go to the question from Bridge Over Teddy Water, who asks, inspired by the Commanders buying land well outside of DC.
Outside of DC, by the way.
If you had to pick up US Bank Stadium and move it to an outer suburb or exurb, which one would you move it to and why? Considering the distance, they're basically moving it to St. Cloud.
Yeah, it's like exurb is the wrong word here to describe like well, let's see proposed land. Or I shouldn't say proposed land, but purchased land in Virginia, potential new stadium site per report. Dumfries, Virginia. So Dumfries, Virginia to Washington, D.C. Let's see what we get. It is, well, that's not quite. That's 30 miles.
So basically you're looking at like past Lakeville.
No, Blaine's way too close. Okay. No, Forest Lake? That would be wild.
Boy, I've been on that
it's
road.
A little bit further out than Forest Lake, actually.
Yeah, I've been on that route to Forest Lake. That's a long. I was just imagining having it out in Lakeville and only having I-35 to deal with in order to get home.
It's actually the funniest one to me. So it's definitely further than Northfield. Yeah, it's about 10 miles further out than Northfield is. Okay. Yeah, let's put it in Northfield because I like Northfield. I like visiting Northfield. And while this would absolutely ruin Northfield's vibes forever, for me personally, getting to go there for games, I would enjoy that for the first couple of years before Northfield is irrevocably ruined by the Vikings moving there. Sorry, Northfield.
Yeah. It would basically be what was going to happen to Anoka if they ended up building an Anoka.
Yeah. Geez, like Northfield, Red Wing, God, I can't believe. Okay, well, I mean I can because it's the Commanders.
The best part about this potential move is the fact that state legislators are complaining, saying that they don't really know if they're going to pick up the tab. They don't know if the Commanders really have a history with the Washington and Virginia area. Yeah.
Well, okay, so like. I retweeted I forget his name, JP something, JP Lindsay. I'll get the name right because he's actually a pretty good reporter, so I want to get it right. Which, if he was a JP Finlay, sorry, I think I've even tried to get him on the podcast before, so I'm sorry. So tweets out from Virginia State Senator Chap Peterson why he's pulling his vote for stadium funding, includes some very strong language. So part of it is he said that the Washington Commanders are not that team, referring to the previous Washington team. They have no history, no tradition, and no fan base. I do not consider them an appropriate economic partner for the Commonwealth of Virginia because I don't think they have the community support to survive. So part of it is the change in branding for the team, right? But I think part of it's also that Washington is just not good enough, like as a football team, to merit that kind of commitment, right? like if you were better at football, or if you were still the Washington Slurs, this guy might do it, right? But for now, no. So the two concerns were, one, it is way too far from an urban setting. Two, this is the Washington Commanders. I don't know who they are. They're not good, I can tell you that.
I just like the idea that the team is the team, but he just didn't recognize the name change because he wasn't paying attention. Like, is that an expansion team? No, NIMBY. Keep that out of Virginia.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Put that trash in Maryland. We'll be fine. Fantastic. Put that stuff in Pentagon City. Don't bring it over here. We're not dealing with that. Chris asks, which former Bears quarterback is more likely to have success this season? Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky?
Good.
There's a noise for you.
I even knew this question was coming too. I guess Nick Foles is a former Bears quarterback. I'm going to go with Nick Foles. Where is he? I know
Foles
Mitch Trubisky
just got picked up. I believe he's backing up Matt Ryan.
Oh, perfect. Nick Foles will succeed more than Mitch Trubisky. Because here's the thing. Trubisky, was he with the Steelers, right?
Yes.
Is the starting quarterback for the Steelers.
Likely.
And they just drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round. And Mitch Trubisky will have an opportunity to start game one, and then he'll fail hard enough that the Steelers will play Kenny Pickett instead. Getting an opportunity and failing is much worse publicly in terms of your perception than not getting that opportunity at all.
Say what you will, but Matt Ryan doesn't really miss a lot of games due to injury. So
there you go.
It would be possible for Foles to keep cashing those checks.
Yeah, so I think Foles is going to succeed more. I can't believe Trubisky got that contract for just kind of being around the Bills for a bit.
He just needed to get the stink off him for a little bit.
I'm not that guy. Did you see me in like the 10 snaps in the preseason? That's the real me.
That's me. You see me throwing bombs to Diggs? That's me. It's not, Diggs' ability to make any quarterback look like an all-pro. No. Nothing of the sort. Nolan Kaler.
I am good. I'm a starting quarterback. I'm Mitchell Trubisky.
Did you see what I did on the left side of the field there? Diggs wasn't anywhere near that ball when I threw it up in the air. He happened to catch it, but, Nolan Kaler asks, for this intersection of Norse Code and Arif's legal corner, what advice can Arif share with owners in order to ensure that players can earn a non-laughable wage and the superior game can return to the field in all of its 5-yard cushion rule glory? So apparently there's trouble in paradise in the CFL.
I guess. So the CFL players have rejected the new labor deal. Also, an airline employee squared up with a CFL player. That video is against a CFL player?
Yeah, well, a former NFL player.
Brendan Langley.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I say like I'm intimately familiar with who Brendan Langley is.
Oh, I had him over for dinner a couple of times. Nice guy. Does not pull a punch.
I remember watching him at the Senior Bowl. That's how I remember Brendan Langley. I believe he went to Lamar. The name of the college he went to. He's a small school guy. He did pretty well at the Senior Bowl.
Did you describe him as explosive or very good with his hands?
I don't remember how I described him. But okay, so first of all, my first impression of the fight was, man, Brendan Langley was extremely kind. like I know that he like washed the guy and made him bleed, and when the guy got back up, he was dizzy. But when the guy came back for him, if Langley had allowed him to get into his space and then thrown a punch, I would have been fine. I would have been like, that makes sense to me, right? But he gave the guy multiple warnings to not do it again. Then he told his coworkers and or friends, hey, you got to hold this guy back. Hey, you need to pull him aside. Like, he gave multiple chances to multiple people to prevent a second occurrence, and it worked, right?
Meanwhile, the guy's getting up off the ground going, I didn't hear no bell.
Right, yeah, it's just wild. Okay, so anyway, I did not know it was Brendan Langley. There was a musician that was clout sharking it, saying it was him. I knew it wasn't him, but he went viral anyway, because nobody asked me before he went viral. I don't know why. Canadian ratio, the big roadblock standing in the way of the new CF. Canadian ratio. So it must be the ratio of revenue that goes to players, I assume. That's a video. I'm not going to play it.
That's a level of research we're just not doing for Norse Code.
Not live. Okay, so it's the second work stoppage in CFL history, the first since 1974. The CFLPA's executive committee recommended the deal, which means that it could be time for a new executive committee. It kind of does mean that. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers plan to practice amidst a strike. Okay, so I assume it has something to do with the share of revenue. The most obvious solution here, of course, is to increase the share of revenue that goes to players. Me, a communist, will present a solution that many people will think is communist, but it's more market socialist than anything, which is to give up ownership and provide and return ownership, or I shouldn't say return, turn over ownership to the players. That is the response here. That is the best possible solution in a market condition. You don't even have to unionize. The union just gets it. It's a co-op now.
So you feel better now that you're spreading your communist ways?
This isn't communist. It's market socialist. It's different. I promise.
All right. Well, speaking of fights, Drawplay Dave asks, what celebrity do you want to punch the most?
So when he said that, the first name that came to my head was Chris Pratt. Now, mind you, if Chris Pratt has an opportunity to respond, I'm dead, right? I don't stand a chance. I'm assuming that I am free of consequences, both legal and physical. All kinds of retaliation are off the board. But honestly, I just kind of hate Chris Pratt. It's not, and he's not a bad actor. I just don't like him as a person. And there's so many more better candidates. Technically, Jordan Peterson's a celebrity.
Technically.
Right? So I would much rather, right? Donald Trump's a celebrity. Now, mind you, I would never do that. I just want anybody listening to know that this is not a credible threat against a public official or a former public official. I'm just saying, you have an opportunity and you're free from any consequence, and it does not exist in this current physical plane of reality. I'm thinking about it. So those are up there. And Trump is a unique figure because he is both a celebrity and a former public official. You can't really say that about, like, say, Henry Kissinger, right? So I'm going to take him off the board. I
was going to say Henry Kissinger's also like in his super late 90s.
Well, that's one of the things that's appealing about it, right? I'm not going to go any further.
One of the things that's appealing about it.
Well, it's just you can finish someone's story arc is all I'm saying.
By blasting them into the shadow realm.
right. So I'm gonna say Jordan Peterson because I just feel like that one's got to be satisfying, and also I think it would be the best for him too. I know that sounds crazy. Hear me out. I don't know that he is handling his return from an objectively sad thing, which is the treatment for a drug addiction, which I'm never going to make fun of him for. I don't know that this is really the best for him. And if he is forced to see a new perspective at a very high rate of speed, maybe he'll drop out of public life for his own health.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. I don't think.
Oh no! Then I'll have punched him for nothing.
Oh no! Curse this beautiful situation. Nick Swardson, next question. We're going to go to Eli, who asks, I am transferring to Northern Arizona University this year and recently was reminded that the great Case Cookus is an NAU legend. Well, this had nothing to do with my decision. It confirmed I had made the right one. My question is, how many days a week is it acceptable to wear a Case Cookus jersey? Should I stick to the NAU jersey, or should I mix in his NFL stops and his star jersey? Also, what are the potential downfalls of being known as the Case Cookus guy?
There's going to be more than one Case Cookus guy there, I promise you. Second, I don't know what the downfalls of being the Case Cookus guy would be. I haven't seen one yet.
I was going to say, as the resident Case Cookus guy, it's worth mentioning there. But.
I get reminded every time he does something. It's fantastic.
It's like having Google alerts that you didn't even need to set.
Yeah. Also, I should probably edit the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks football Wikipedia page, because under its notable former players page, it does not have Case Cookus.
Well, that's ridiculous. And you know what? No one has posted to the Case Cookus wailing wall in 15 days, and that's a crime. So I just did over on the Discord. So
fantastic.
We'll call that good there. Brandon Fisher asks, which?
Well, no, hold on. I do want to add one thing.
Oh,
I did remember at the Combine, I did talk to somebody who covered Case Cookus at Northern Arizona.
That is correct. You did.
So I learned a little bit about Northern Arizona University along the way. Which means I know there's just like things you pick up about campus culture after talking to somebody for 30 minutes about one player. So
is this like when we went to JMU and found out all about the history of like mascot fighting and the security guard and all of that?
Yeah, love the security guard. Great guy. It pulled me through so many college benders without judgment. Love playing flag football on that. Love playing flag football on the quad. It kind of sucks that there's a rec center there, but I understand why they did it.
Your countless days at JMU.
Right, yeah.
That's right.
As a JMU alum. Yeah. Which, man, they embraced me with open arms there. That was weird. But,
great people.
But I will say, be careful of the surprisingly large number of cemeteries near Northern Arizona, and also the legend that Northern Arizona is built on a burial ground is technically not true, or that's what they want you to believe. So they have dug up bones beneath the grounds of Northern Arizona University. That is a fact. The company that dug up those bones in the construction of these various buildings no longer exists. That is also a fact. Now, mind you, that's because the company changed its name, but it was more sinister before I said that.
It absolutely was.
So be careful. Don't tick anybody off, because they could be the spirit of someone long dead and or a Case Cookus fan. Also, wear a Stone Smart jersey. Smart with 2 T's. He was the guy that replaced Case Cookus after Case Cookus was ejected from the game for targeting, the first offensive player in NCAA history, and perhaps the only, to be ejected for targeting.
What a wonderful stat. Brandon Fisher is baiting us here. Which other Vikings podcaster do you think you could take in a street fight? Which one would you not want to throw hands with? Just for the record, Luke Braun has evaded this question multiple times, so answering this would be a power move over Locked On Vikings.
Oh, I could. First of all, I've seen Luke Braun in person. I know I could take him. The thing is, he's not going to disagree with this. He knows I could take him, and I don't think he has a problem with that fact. Second, name one I couldn't take. Now, I'm not saying I'm the most athletic podcaster in the Viking space. I'm not. But I think I could take all of them, except maybe James. That doesn't count. We're on the same podcast.
And a victory for one of us is clearly a victory for all of us.
Yeah, it's a victory for all of us. Now, mind you, Benjamin Gessling does occasionally appear on podcasts, part of the Purple Insider, I think. He is a much better athlete than I am. He is a track coach, or more of a cross-country coach. But yeah, he'll beat me in a race, both short and long. It doesn't really matter what the distance is. But that's not what I'll wash him. I'll wash anybody. Okay, Matthew Collar would probably disagree with this. That's fair. But I'd like to find out.
Like,
again, in the other physical reality that's not this one.
I was gonna say that for those who are unaware, there is a Vikings fight club that happens every training camp. It's why everyone shows up with a couple more bruises. It's also why Eric bikes to training camp in order to like work on his cardio.
Yeah, another example of somebody who's definitely a better athlete than me.
So,
and I could take.
Let's go to Tank B, who asks, inexplicably, Norse Code has turned into a 90s movie. What songs are on the soundtrack? There's already a zany animal sidekick, but who is the edgy alt kid with the secret heart of gold? And who does Freddie Prinze Jr. play in his cameo?
Wait, who's the zany animal sidekick? Is it Don?
I'm going to assume the zany animal sidekick is Nessie.
Oh, Norse Code. Oh, yeah, fair enough. I thought it was like the Vikings blog because we were still talking about the Vikings podcast. Okay.
So the answer to the question, who's the edgy alt kid? For any of us who knew Dusty in high school, I have a
100%, not even close.
Yeah, Dusty's senior picture, which if I receive permission from him, I'll post, involves flaming red hair and I believe the cloud shirt. It's very shiny. So yes, he is.
Yeah. Oh my God.
He is the edgy alt kid with the secret heart of gold. And it's not even close.
Okay, so it's a 90s movie. So Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer's on the soundtrack. Obviously an Eve 6 song at this point.
At this point, this is canon.
But it might not be the Heart in a Blender song, which is all Eve 6 will call it now, not by its actual name, which is Inside Out.
It's going to be what? Here's to Tonight or whatever?
I like that one, but we already have like the heartstring one with Kiss Me. It might be Promise by Eve 6 is really good. I really like the cadence. It's really good for like... there's not like a zany 90s movie doesn't have a training montage, but it has moments that are replicable to a training montage. Mm-hmm. It is a good theme for that. I think, let's see, On the Roof Again, I think it's an Eve 6 song. That one's really good. That one got in my head. I don't know. That one's on Horoscopes. That one might have been released after the 90s, but it was released in 2000. But we're going for a 90s vibe, and that one has a 90s vibe. Also, Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger.
They would have to be on there.
Yeah.
Let's we can't ignore Semisonic. I feel like
absolutely.
FNT, Fascinating New Thing, would probably be the one, but we'd have to see.
Because that one doesn't have the same energy as all of the other ones we were just talking about. So that actually, because there's a bunch of Semisonic songs that have a bunch of different vibes.
Yep.
But we have replicated some of them with some of our choices. So Fascinating New Thing is a really good one. Yeah.
So, you could. I was thinking of the end, or I was thinking of the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, and Letters to Cleo has the I Want You to Want Me cover that would probably work well there too.
Probably a Third Eye Blind song or 8.
Graduate,
1 to 8.
Maybe Graduate.
Yeah, that would fit the zany 90s theme a lot. Misfits would be really good for that too. But Misfits would be like, because it's about misfits, but it's kind of a sadder tone, so it'd be kind of at a low moment. Mind you, Eve 6 hates Third Eye Blind. Like, there's a member of the band. So you'd have to... Things you learn after you follow Eve 6 on Twitter.
What a fun sentence to say.
Right, so you do have to keep that Losing a Whole Year. I don't want to do Semi-Charmed Life. That one's like a little bit too, played out.
That's too on the nose. But if you do something with How It's Gonna Be, you could go and talk to Freddie Prinze Jr.'s character, and who's going through a terrible breakup, and comfort him through that song, or that ends up being a scene.
Yeah. Yeah, Thousand Julys is fun, but I don't think it's a movie soundtrack one. 10 Days Late and Deep Inside of You are a little bit too obviously not 90s movies, right? It's just like, it's like deep about relationships. Great. Camouflage is fun, but probably something just from their self-titled. So obviously Jumper made it onto a couple of soundtracks. I think How's It Gonna Be is probably, that's probably the best one for a soundtrack. Yeah.
You also have to do the All For You song by Sister Hazel.
Mm-hmm.
That's legally required. It's a 90s movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can also do Roll to Me, Del Amitri. And it's 90s. You have to do one or the other. You either have to throw a Blues Traveler song on, or you have to throw in a random Alanis Morissette song. So it's the 90s. You have to determine which way you want to go, because one's going to be a lot more moody than the other.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on the plot, right? Because, like, you could do Run Around Blues Traveler, or you could do actually Virtual Insanity by Jamiroquai would be pretty fun too for like a trip scene.
It could be. But if you're going Blues Traveler, you might as well go with what's the name of the song I'm thinking of? But Anyway. You could go with But Anyway instead. Yeah. There's your opening to the movie.
Perfect.
Fantastic. And because you can have some like inexplicable rap, so let's stick with the 10 Things I Hate About You. We're
Cypress Hill. Just sell out a little bit and just do the Cypress Hill song everybody knows.
No, if we're gonna do this, let's do it proper. Let's do it 10 Things I Hate About You style and toss in Notorious B.I.G.'s Hypnotize just for no good reason.
Sure.
And
perfect.
Because it was the 90s and it would involve Dusty and I in a car, there has to be a song from the Chef Aid album because that was Dusty and I in the late 90s.
Okay.
Listening to Bubble Goose, blasting that as we're going from subway to subway. So yeah, that's just where we're going with that. Is that the end of that question? Good. Don from Ohio asks, for Arif's controversial bee corner, recently I had what I thought was a bee's nest inside of my outdoor TV, but it's likely a hornet's nest. With that said, some in the Norse Code Discord thought it was okay to kill them. Why are wasps / hornets / yellow jackets allowed to be killed, yet it's not okay to kill bees?
Because hornets are ontologically evil? What do you want me to say? Obviously, bees are good, hornets are bad. That's not racist. That's just understanding what species are.
That's just understanding the way the world works, Don. And finally, from Don from Ohio as well, I'm not going to include the name of this corner because I don't believe it to be true, and I don't want to give a false statement on the show. But this is for James and Arif's Don is doing something for his wife corner. I have decided to take the wife back to Hawaii for her 50th birthday because I am a good husband. Yeah, let's go with that. We have narrowed it down to Kauai, where we got married, or Maui. Should we go back to the island where we got married, or shake it up and try a different island? We still have much to explore on Kauai, still including the monastery and all of these different food trucks and beaches.
Okay, so I didn't know if you wanted to go to the follow-up question right away. Fair enough. I would say go to Maui, right? It just got to get a different kind of atmosphere and see what you kind of have an opportunity to compare and contrast, because I think you would deepen your appreciation of both by having an opportunity to compare and contrast the two. Plus, there is so much to do in Maui, obviously. Now, it is, I think, a little bit more, they're both touristy, but I would say probably Maui is going to feel a little bit more plastic touristy, if that makes sense. Like, if you get involved in, like, if you travel enough, you begin to see the signs of, like, corporate tourism sounds like the weirdest way to put it, but it's just like mass-produced tourism. So you're going to have to deal with that and find, experiences that expand you beyond that. But I think having a multitude of experiences in the same state as a tourist is probably going to sharpen your memories of each one of them in distinct ways that will allow you to appreciate both more. But I think you probably can't go wrong with either decision here.
I would go with the new island specifically because you could find yourself falling back into, yeah, but last time we were here, we did this and it was really fun. And while it's fun to do that a little bit, part of the point of this is to explore more, is to do more things, because there were so many things you want to do the first time that you didn't. So that would be my suggestion, would be to go to the area that puts you in a position where you can't do that, where you can't just go back and rehash the things that you really enjoyed before. Now you have to, continue on it and discover more. But Damian Barrett asks an important follow-up question. He says, given Don's history of using special occasions to break bad news to his wife on what a terrible husband/partner he's been, what heinous crime warrants this level of gesture that he'll be admitting to on this trip?
Great question, Damian. And I'm so glad that you asked it. Not because I have an answer, but because it's so great that you asked it.
It's more the fact that it was asked at all.
Right.
Is what makes it wonderful.
Yeah, like the question would not be funny at all if this didn't have a basis in history. Yeah. So
I mean, it's clear that he's taking this vacation to announce to her that he's about to go to jail for tax fraud or something. Like,
right, or he can't pay off the loans for his outdoor oven.
Yeah, clearly this is where it's all going to. Finally, from Damian Barrett, he said, as you're both probably aware, the recent rugby semi-final cup match between Munster and Toulouse, sure, Toulouse, why not? Went to a penalty shootout. Obviously, I was very aware of this. Went to a penalty shootout after the game ended in a draw. Only the second time in 27 years this has happened. Should the NFL scrap overtime in favor of this? Now, did you get a chance to see the video of this, by the way?
I did watch the whole thing. It was kind of fun.
It was fun to see the different angles they had to kick from.
Yes, they had to kick from 3 different angles.
And that's why I'm cool with it.
2 different distances. So it was like 10 meters was the long distance, which I don't know, it was like 33 feet or something like that. Or 33, yeah. But the angles were so sharp, right, that it was really difficult. And then there was a short distance, maybe 5 meters. And I think it's meters to the I'm going to call it an end zone, and you're all going to have to live with that. To the end zone, I don't think it's meters to the to the post that they had to kick through. So there's some additional length on top of that. Anyway, they had to kick straight on plus left and right, and it's basically, it looked like where the numbers would be on a football field. You had to kick from the numbers at a really sharp angle. So a couple of things struck me about it. First is that there were 6 kicks, but 3 players. So you had to select 3 players that each kicked twice, from both distances. Second, the one thing that struck me is the crowd was quiet, like respectfully quiet when the essentially the away team kicker lined up, which I thought was fascinating, right? Because there was a message around the stadium that's like, please respect the kicker. And so they were quiet for both teams' kicking attempts. Obviously, when the home team's kick attempts went through, they broke out into cheers, and when the away team's kick went through, they didn't, right? But that I thought was interesting, right? Because, NBA fans during free throws or NFL fans during field goal kicks, they'll go wild, right? And then, I don't think one is better than the other. I just thought that was kind of fascinating. Also, the YouTube comments were like very European, like, oh, he missed the kick. What a lad. I'm sure his team stuck up. I hope his team, stuck up for him. I'm sure they did. Right. And it was just like the cadence was weird. They used the word lad. It was great. So my proposal is 6 kicks at crazy kicking angles like that. Right. So 2 straight on, 2 from the numbers. Why not? But also, in order to be eligible to be one of the 3 players kicking through those 6 kicks, you cannot have kicked a football in that game. That's my next So you have to have 3 players that have not kicked a football. So if you quarterback pooch punted, if you kicked a field goal, if you punted, if you kicked a kickoff, you could not kick the football for this. Now, if you accidentally kick a football after, that doesn't count. You have to like kick as an element of play. So then you have to figure out, hey, can the long snapper kick? I don't know. Should they practice? Maybe it's not worth it. Hey, do we have like an Ndamukong Suh and Odell Beckham who like kicked a little bit? Like when they were like playing, like, I don't know. So that's my second thing, right? Because like in rugby, like my understanding of rugby, a sport that I watch all the time, is that to some degree, everybody should have some kicking ability, right? And so they all kind of practice it to some degree. One of the players that was kicking was like the World Player of the Year, Antoine Dupont or something like that, right? That was interesting to me. And just seeing these like insane athletes that are just like built up, like they're just like come off the bus, like built like rocks, right? Or just kicking, right? You just don't see that in football. I thought was fun. So I would love it if like you were like, hey, our left tackle's a really good kicker, relatively speaking. He's going to be kicking from the numbers. Like I like that. So they can't have kicked in the game. It is 6 kicks, 3 different players, 2 different distances.
Think about how much more fun it would be to explain to players who forgot that there can be ties. Like,
yes.
The explanation is so that we're all just used to now, as far as though this is how overtime works and everything. Think about how much more fun it would be to listen to Al Michaels go, all right, so the rule states that somebody who hasn't kicked has to kick. So we've got Kirk Cousins lining up now. It would throw absolute, and if I could include those stats in the Hell League, I would ascend.
Oh my God. Yes.
I would ascend.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm all about this, and I feel like the NFL competition committee should absolutely put this in immediately. I want to see all of the training camp footage of players trying like hell to make a kick.
I think, and then after a couple of years of that, actually, no, after no years of that, before we implement this, also, I think in the fourth quarter, you should get access to a 6-point field goal. Again, it has to be a player who hasn't kicked at all, and it has to be from at least 20 yards out. I think that would be hilarious.
Yes. Yes, I absolutely agree.
All right, perfect.
All right, we're set. All right, that's the end of this. We're accomplishing things. We're helping the game.
Yeah, we're moving the game forward.
Kicking and screaming. We are moving it forward toward its inevitable conclusion. Yes, that is where we are at. Welcome to the end of this episode of Norse Code. That's a fun sentence. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I've got the Ed Ingram scouting report coming up. I've got another piece at The Athletic going up probably Friday. Other than that, honestly, not much. There have been some events that have occurred outside the football realm that have occupied our attention, that are devastating and sad. I did offer some takes on somebody's Twitch stream. They may get turned into a VOD. I don't know. If that does get turned into a YouTube video, I will link that. Obviously, it's very somber. We didn't talk about that this episode because we wanted to kind of have a discussion that was kind of exclusive of that, independent of that, so we could have a little space for that. But if you do want to hear what I have to say about some of the stuff related to it, that might get turned into a YouTube video where I was on somebody else's stream to talk about it. So there is that, but primarily the only things I know that I'm plugging are the 2 pieces at The Athletic.
So that's gonna be episode. That's gonna be the end of this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back in a couple of weeks here to talk more about the Minnesota Vikings and all things Don's marriage. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember that the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of The Athletic, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at Norse Code DN, or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/Norse Code and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.
This is absolutely a situation of why we can't have nice things.
Right. Like, it's just like, what the hell is Sean Mannion doing out there? Wait, is he a good kicker? No way.
Wait,
like,
is that why they signed him? Think about how much more fun the
right.
the signing deadline would be. But like, think about how much more fun the free agency stuff would be. Be like,
right.
yeah,
it's just like,
you paid him.
He's the backup guard, but he can kind of kick it.
Yeah. Wait, you gave that guy how much money? Yeah, but in the fourth quarter, like he's guaranteed.
We need the 6-point field goal.
He's guaranteed from like 35 yards. There's only like 12 guys in the world who can do that.
There is going to be a team that would roster a second kicker. Like they would just do it.
Oh,
right?
that's got Jerry Jones written all over it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Just be like, yeah, he's active on game day. We don't need the 9th offensive lineman. It's fine.
No, that would be silly. Why would you have that? Like we're famous for our players never getting injured. So why would you need any sort of depth?
Right. Famously injury free.
Between that and the desire to blind both teams in the third quarter, yeah, this is what we do. That would be amazing. I would love to watch Yahoo try to figure out the stats on that.
Oh yeah, it would be amazing. Yeah, for sure.
It'd be like, why did Yahoo's servers burn? Well, they were all fine until the NFL changed this rule, and now it's all gone to shit. Fantastic. All right.